I need to ask you something that's going to sound absolutely insane." Those were the last words a dying millionaire said before changing Officer Danielle Monroe's life forever. She expected a confession, maybe a final request for comfort. What she got instead made her question everything. "Adopt my grandson, a child you've never met, using money I stole, before I die in 72 hours. Oh, and his biological mother who abandoned him 6 years ago? She's coming back to take him." Danielle had 3 days to decide if she'd compromise 23 years of integrity to save one 8-year-old boy. 3 days before the courts, the biological mother and her own conscience would destroy everything. The question wasn't whether she'd say yes. It was whether she could live with herself if she said no. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now back to our story. The fluorescent lights in Huntsville Medical Prison flickered like dying stars, casting shadows that danced across sterile white walls. Officer Danielle Monroe stood outside room 347, her hand resting on the cold metal doorframe, listening to the labored breathing coming from within. 23 years she'd worn this badge. 23 years of proving herself in rooms where she was the only woman, the only black face, the only one who had to earn respect twice before receiving it once. But nothing in those 2 decades had prepared her for this. Inside that room lay a man worth millions, dying in a prison hospital bed with sheets that smelled of industrial bleach and resignation. Richard "Rick" Holloway. The name still carried weight in Texas, even now. Oil money, real estate empires. A fall from grace so spectacular, it made headlines for months. Some called him a criminal. Others whispered he'd been made an example of, that men with lighter skin had walked free for doing far worse. Danielle didn't know what she believed anymore. 3 months ago, she'd been assigned to his security detail. Standard protocol for high-profile inmates receiving extended medical care. She'd expected arrogance, maybe bitterness. What she found instead was a man haunted by questions he'd never asked himself until it was almost too late. The first conversation happened by accident. She'd been standing guard during his chemotherapy session when he suddenly spoke, his voice raw from medication. "You ever wonder if the things we build outlive the damage we cause?" Danielle had looked at him then, really looked. Saw past the prison jumpsuit and the IV drip, past the reputation and the court transcripts. Saw someone approximately her age, maybe a few years older, carrying the same weight she knew too well. The weight of being judged before being known. "Every single day," she'd answered. That's when everything changed. Now, 2 months later, she pushed open the door to find Rick awake, staring at the ceiling tiles as though they held answers to questions he hadn't yet voiced. His lawyer had left an hour ago. Whatever they'd discussed had left Rick looking somehow lighter and heavier all at once. "You're back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My shift started 10 minutes ago." Danielle pulled a chair closer to the bed, something she'd stopped asking permission to do weeks earlier. "You look like you've made a decision." Rick turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her spine straighten. "I need to ask you something, Officer Monroe. Something that's going to sound absolutely insane." "Most things you say sound insane," she replied, allowing the smallest smile. "That's never stopped you before." But he didn't smile back. Instead, he struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at tubes and tender flesh. His hands, once used to signing million-dollar deals, trembled as they gripped the bedrail. "What I'm about to ask isn't for me," Rick began, his words measured, deliberate. "It's bigger than anything I built, bigger than any empire I thought mattered. It's about the people I forgot existed when I was too busy climbing. It's about the communities I came from and abandoned once I could afford to forget." Danielle felt her pulse quicken. In all their conversations, discussions about systemic racism, about second chances, about the children neither of them had, Rick had never sounded like this. Never this focused. Never this afraid she might say no. "The doctors gave me 6 weeks," he continued. "Maybe 8 if I'm stubborn, which we both know I am. My lawyers have been working on something, but it requires a person, not a foundation, not a charity, not some corporation that'll twist everything into tax breaks and photo opportunities." He paused, studying her face, as though memorizing every detail. "It requires someone who understands what it means to be invisible in plain sight. Someone who knows the system is broken, but still believes it can be fixed. One life at a time. Someone who won't walk away when things get complicated." The air in the room felt suddenly thick, pressing against Danielle's chest. "What are you asking me, Rick?" He reached toward the bedside table with shaking fingers, pulling out a manila folder that looked far too thin to contain anything life-changing. But as he held it toward her, his eyes glistened with something she'd never seen there before. Tears. "I'm asking you to help me undo some of the damage," he whispered. "I'm asking you to take something precious, something worth more than every dollar I ever made, and protect it, guide it, give it the chance I never had." Danielle's hand hovered over the folder, not quite touching it, as though accepting it would seal some unspoken covenant. "What's in there?" Rick's voice broke. "Everything I should have cared about from the beginning." She opened the folder. What she saw inside made her breath catch, made her hands tremble, made her understand instantly why Rick looked simultaneously terrified and hopeful. Have you ever been asked to do something that could change someone's entire future? Tell us in the comments what you would do if someone's dying wish landed in your hands. Because what Rick Holloway was asking Officer Danielle Monroe to do wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. And it was the most important thing either of them would ever attempt. To understand why Danielle Monroe stood frozen in that hospital room, staring at documents that would reshape her entire existence, you need to understand the road that brought her there. Danielle was born in 1971 in 5th Ward, Houston, a neighborhood where strength wasn't optional and dreams had to be defended. Her grandmother, Esther, had been a maid in River Oaks, cleaning houses for families who never learned her last name. Her mother, Patricia, broke that cycle by becoming a nurse, working double shifts so Danielle could attend better schools, could have chances that previous generations only whispered about. Patricia died when Danielle was 19. Breast cancer, caught too late because working 2 jobs meant putting off doctor visits, meant choosing between mammograms and rent. Danielle had been studying criminal justice at Prairie View A&M when the call came. She remembered dropping the phone, remembered the way the dorm floor felt against her knees, remembered thinking that no amount of education could protect the people you loved from a system that measured their worth in dollar signs. She finished her degree in her mother's memory, joined the police academy in 1994, graduated top of her class, and walked into the Dallas Police Department expecting to change things. Reality taught her differently. The first time a senior officer called her girl instead of Monroe, she corrected him professionally. The second time, she reported it. The third time, she learned that being right didn't mean being heard. She watched men with half her scores get promoted while she stayed on patrol. Watched cases involving black victims receive less attention, less urgency, less justice. But Danielle didn't quit. Quitting would mean Patricia's sacrifices meant nothing. Instead, she transferred to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in 2003, figuring if the system was broken, she'd work from the inside. Prison work was harder, lonelier. But it was also where she met people who reminded her why she'd started. People who'd made mistakes, but weren't mistakes themselves. She'd been married once. Marcus. They'd met at a community barbecue in 2001, married 18 months later in a small ceremony that her grandmother attended from a wheelchair, tears streaming down her weathered face. Marcus worked construction, loved Sundays at church, wanted children. But badges and babies don't always mix well, especially when the badge belonged to a woman who couldn't stop bringing her work home. The arguments started small, missed dinners, canceled plans, Danielle's inability to unsee the things she witnessed daily. By 2008, Marcus admitted what they'd both known for months. He'd married a woman, but she'd become a mission. The divorce was quiet, civilized, devastating. She threw herself deeper into work after that, became the officer people requested when situations required both firmness and compassion. Built a reputation for seeing inmates as humans first, numbers second. That's why, when Rick Holloway needed long-term security during his medical crisis, her supervisor called her specifically. "Monroe, we've got a situation," Lieutenant Barnes had said 3 months prior, adjusting his glasses the way he always did when delivering complicated news. High-profile inmate, terminal diagnosis, political nightmare if anything goes wrong. Needs someone professional, someone who won't be intimidated by money or lawyers or media attention. "You're describing yourself, sir," Danielle had replied, though she already knew where this was heading. "I'm describing you." Barnes had slid the file across his desk. Richard Holloway. Made his first million in oil speculation back in the 80s, turned it into a real estate empire. Got caught in a fraud case in 2004. Documents forged, investors misled, the whole mess. Prosecutors said he stole $40 million. His lawyers said the evidence was circumstantial at best, racially motivated at worst. Danielle had opened the file, studying the photograph of a man who looked simultaneously powerful and exhausted. "What do you think?" she'd asked Barnes, whose opinion she trusted more than most. "I think justice isn't always just," Barnes had answered carefully. "I think a lot of wealthy men did similar things and never saw the inside of a courtroom. I also think he broke the law, whether the punishment fit the crime or not. And now he's dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, maybe 3 months, probably less. He's requested transfer to the medical facility for treatment. We need someone on his detail who can handle both security and the inevitable circus." That had been September. Now it was December, and the man in that file had become something unexpected. A mirror. Rick Holloway had grown up in Marshall, Texas in the 1950s, a time when separate but equal was the law, and nothing about it was equal. His father had worked at a sawmill. His mother cleaned houses. Rick was brilliant. Everyone said so. But brilliance without opportunity is like seeds on concrete. He'd escaped through a football scholarship to a small college, then to business school through sheer determination and strategic charm. By 30, he owned his first oil rig. By 40, he was a millionaire several times over. By 50, he was proving every success story they'd told him was impossible. But success in America, especially for a black man in Texas, came with a price. always watched, always scrutinized, always one mistake away from confirming someone's prejudice. Rick had built walls around himself, emotional fortresses that protected his empire, but isolated his soul. His marriage had crumbled in the 90s. His wife, Lorraine, had wanted the man she'd married in their 20s, the dreamer, the fighter. But that man got buried under board meetings and paranoia, under the constant pressure to be 3 times as good for half the recognition. They had no children. Lorraine had wanted them desperately. Rick kept saying, soon, kept promising, when things settle down, kept prioritizing everything except the family they could have built. When the FBI came in 2003, Rick's world imploded spectacularly. Assets frozen, associates disappeared, lawyers cost more than some people made in lifetimes. The trial was ugly, covered extensively in media that painted him as either a villain or a victim, depending on which channel you watched. He got 15 years. Would have been out by now if his body hadn't started betraying him. Prison changed Rick, though not the way most people imagine. He didn't find religion or suddenly become a saint. Instead, he found clarity. Removed from the noise of wealth and reputation, he finally saw what he'd been too busy to notice. The system he'd navigated so brilliantly was designed to crush most people who looked like him. He'd been the exception, and he'd mistaken that exception for proof the system worked. It didn't. Behind bars, Rick met men serving decades for crimes that stole nothing close to 40 million. Met fathers separated from children for mistakes made in desperation. Met boys, because that's what they were when sentenced, who'd never had the chances he'd fought for. That's when the idea started forming. An idea about legacy, about repair, about doing something meaningful before his time ran out. He'd needed someone to help execute it. Someone strong enough to handle the responsibility, compassionate enough to care, positioned correctly to make it work. Someone exactly like Officer Danielle Monroe. In their first real conversation, after that initial exchange during chemotherapy, Rick had asked her something that caught her completely off guard. "Do you believe people can change, Officer Monroe?" "I believe people can reveal who they always were," she'd answered. "Change implies becoming someone different. Growth is becoming more yourself." Rick had smiled at that. A real smile, tired but genuine. "Then I'm trying to grow back into someone I forgot I could be." Over weeks, they'd talked about everything. About Rick's regrets, not the crimes he'd committed, though he admitted those too, but the people he'd neglected. About Danielle's frustrations with a system that asked her to enforce laws that weren't enforced equally. About racism, both the overt kind their parents endured and the subtle kind that persisted in boardrooms and courtrooms. About loneliness, both of them knew it well. "You ever think about what you'd do if you could start over?" Rick had asked one afternoon, his voice weak from treatment. "Every day," Danielle had admitted. "But starting over isn't really an option, is it? We can only move forward with what we know now." "What if forward meant taking on something terrifying?" "Then I guess it depends on whether it's worth being terrified for." Rick had nodded slowly, filing that answer away, like he was collecting pieces of a puzzle only he could see. Now, standing in his room with that manila folder in her hands, Danielle understood what he'd been building toward. Inside the folder were photographs, documents, legal papers drafted by expensive lawyers, but written in language deliberately simple, and a letter. In Rick's shaky handwriting, that began, "To whom it may concern, Officer Danielle Monroe has been entrusted with my most precious investment. What would you sacrifice to give someone else the chance you never had?" Drop your thoughts below. Danielle looked up from the papers, her eyes wide, her voice barely steady. Rick, I can't. You're asking me to. I'm asking you to save someone, Rick interrupted gently. The way someone should have saved me. The way someone should have saved you. Her hands trembled. Where is already arranged? Rick whispered. But the paperwork, the custody, the guardianship, it all needs someone the courts will trust. Someone with a clean record, a stable career, a reason to care. I'm a corrections officer, Rick. I'm single. I work unpredictable hours. You're perfect, he said firmly. You're exactly what's needed. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand what happens when nobody cares. When the system just processes people instead of protecting them. Danielle sat down hard in the chair, her mind racing through impossibilities, because Rick Holloway hadn't asked her to manage his money or distribute his wealth to charities. He'd asked her to become a mother. The child's name was Cameron, 8 years old, and according to the documents in Danielle's shaking hands, he was Rick Holloway's grandson, a fact that, until 6 months ago, Rick himself hadn't known existed. The story came out in pieces, Rick's voice growing weaker as he pushed through pain medication to explain. His son, Marcus, yes, same name as Danielle's ex-husband, a coincidence that felt almost cruel, had been the result of a brief relationship in Rick's early 20s, before the money, before the empire. The mother, Angela, had never told Rick she was pregnant. Pride, maybe. Or fear that a man climbing his way out of poverty wouldn't want the anchor of fatherhood pulling him back down. Marcus grew up knowing Rick's name, but not his presence. Watched his father's success from a distance, a ghost of what could have been. Struggled with anger, with addiction, with the weight of being abandoned, even though Rick never knew he existed. Angela died in 1998, Rick explained, his words coming slowly. Marcus was 17, went into the foster system for a year, aged out, spiraled. I didn't know any of this. Didn't know I had a son living 3 hours away, trying to survive in a world that gave him nothing. Marcus had his own child young. Cameron's mother, Shanice, was barely 19 when she got pregnant. They tried to make it work, but poverty and trauma don't disappear just because a baby needs them to. Shanice left when Cameron was 2, not out of cruelty, but out of the kind of desperation that makes people run from love because they don't believe they deserve it. Marcus raised Cameron alone, worked minimum wage jobs, struggled with substances, fought demons. Rick could have helped defeat if only he'd known they existed. Then, last spring, Marcus died. Overdose. Whether accidental or intentional, the coroner couldn't definitively say. Someone from the hospital, a social worker who'd handled Marcus's intake, found Marcus's belongings, found a letter he'd been carrying, addressed to Richard Holloway in Huntsville prison. A letter Marcus had apparently written, but never sent, detailing everything. The son Rick never knew about, the grandson who existed, the life that had paralleled Rick's success with perfect tragic symmetry. The social worker, rather than throwing it away, had mailed it. Rick received it 2 days after his cancer diagnosis. I read that letter 20 times, Rick said, tears streaming down his weathered face. Read about a son who hated me for abandoning him, even though I never knew he existed. Read about addiction, about poverty, about systems failing him at every turn. Read about Cameron, this 8-year-old boy who'd just lost the only parent he'd ever known. Where is Cameron now? Danielle asked, though part of her didn't want to know, didn't want this to become real. Foster care. Temporary placement with a family in Austin. Good people, I'm told. but temporary. The state is looking for permanent solutions. Family members? Angela's family is out of the picture. Moved out of state decades ago. No contact. Shanice's whereabouts are unknown. I'm in prison with months to live. Cameron has no one. Rick reached out, his hand finding Danielle's wrist, with surprising strength. Except he does, Rick continued, because I've liquidated everything I legally can. Set up trusts, education funds, housing arrangements. My lawyers have been working for months to get everything perfect. Cameron won't just survive, he'll thrive. College paid for, home secured, everything. Then why do you need me? Danielle asked, though she already knew. Because money without love is what destroyed my relationship with Marcus. Money without guidance is what leaves children rich, but empty. Cameron doesn't need a trust fund manager, Officer Monroe. He needs a parent. The weight of it crashed over Danielle like a wave. This wasn't a donation request or charity work. This was Rick Holloway, dying in a prison hospital bed, asking a corrections officer he'd known for 3 months to adopt his grandson. Rick, I can't just... People don't adopt children they've never met. The courts don't work that way. The system fails black children every single day. Rick interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp despite his weakness. You know that as well as I do. Cameron is a black boy who just lost his father, has no extended family, will likely bounce between foster homes until he ages out, like Marcus did. You think the system is going to give him what he needs? That doesn't mean I'm the solution. Why not? Rick challenged. You're a state employee with an exemplary record. You own your home. I looked into it, hope you don't mind. You've been background checked more thoroughly than most people applying for adoption. You're financially stable. And most importantly, he paused, making sure she was listening. You understand what it means to be a black child in America who needs someone to believe in them. Danielle stood abruptly, the chair scraping against linoleum. She paced to the window, staring out at the prison yard where men walked in circles, counting down sentences that measured their worth in years stolen. I'm 43 years old, she said to the glass. I've been alone for over a decade. My marriage failed partly because I couldn't balance career and family. I work in a prison, Rick. I see the worst of humanity daily. How am I supposed to raise a child in that? The same way your mother raised you while working double shifts as a nurse, Rick replied quietly. The same way my mother raised me while cleaning houses for people who looked through her like she was furniture. You do it because the alternative, letting another black child become a statistic, is unacceptable. Danielle turned to face him, tears blurring her vision. What if I fail him? What if you don't? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and terror. Rick reached toward the bedside table again, pulling out another envelope. This one sealed, with, "For Danielle," written across it in careful letters that suggested he'd written it on a good day, when his hands were steadier. Don't open it now, he said. Open it tonight, when you're home, when you can really think. Inside is a letter from me, explaining everything. And there's something else, something I want you to see before you decide. What? Photos, Rick whispered. Of Cameron, taken by the foster family last month. I asked them to send me pictures so I could see the grandson I'll never meet in person, so I could understand what I'm asking you to protect. Danielle took the envelope with numb fingers. The lawyers are ready, Rick continued. All the paperwork is prepared. If you agree, we can start the process immediately. Given my health situation and your background, my lawyers believe the courts will expedite. You could meet Cameron within 2 weeks. And if I say no? Rick's face crumpled slightly. Then Cameron becomes another child, lost in a system that doesn't have enough good people or enough resources. He'll probably survive. Kids are resilient, but survive isn't the same as thrive, is it? Danielle clutched both envelopes, the legal documents and the personal letter, against her chest, like they might disappear if she loosened her grip. "I need time," she managed. "You have until Monday," Rick said, not unkindly. "The courts need an answer. Cameron's temporary placement is only guaranteed another 6 weeks. After that, they'll move him again, and the window for private adoption arrangements closes." 3 days, Danielle breathed. "You're giving me 3 days to decide whether to become a mother." "I'm giving you 3 days to decide whether to become the person you've always wanted to be," Rick corrected gently. "The person your mother raised. The person who chose law enforcement, not because it was easy, but because you believed you could protect people who needed protecting." He coughed, the sound wet and painful, reminding them both that his timeline was measured in weeks, not the years Cameron would need. "There's one more thing," Rick said, his voice barely audible now. "In that envelope, with the photos, there's a letter Cameron's father wrote, the one Marcus carried, but never sent. I want you to read it, not because it'll make this decision easier. It won't. But because you need to understand what's at stake." "What does it say?" Rick closed his eyes, reciting from memory. "I don't know if you're a good man or a bad man. I don't know if you think about me, if you regret me, if you even know I exist. But I have a son now, and I understand things I couldn't before. I understand that children don't ask to be born, don't ask for broken homes or absent fathers, or systems that fail them. They just ask to be loved. And I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying to be what you weren't. But I'm drowning. And I don't know how to save him when I can't even save myself." Silence filled the room, broken only by the mechanical beep of monitors measuring Rick's declining life. "Cameron is Marcus's last wish," Rick whispered, "and helping Cameron is mine. But I can't do it from here. I need someone who will fight for him the way no one fought for Marcus. Someone who won't give up when things get hard, because raising a traumatized 8-year-old will be the hardest thing you've ever done." "You really believe I can do this?" Danielle asked, her voice cracking. "I believe you're the only one who can," Rick answered. "Because you're not doing this for me, or even for Cameron. You're doing it because somewhere in 5th Ward, Houston, your mother made impossible sacrifices so you could have a chance. And now, you get to pass that forward." Danielle looked down at the envelopes in her hands, at the decision that would either define her legacy or become the biggest mistake of her life. She thought about Patricia Monroe, who'd worked herself into an early grave so her daughter could become someone. Thought about Esther, who'd cleaned houses where she wasn't valued so her granddaughter could enter rooms as an equal. Thought about all the black women in her family line who'd carried impossible burdens so the next generation could walk a little lighter. And she thought about Cameron, a child she'd never met, whose face she'd never seen, who was waiting somewhere in Austin, Texas, wondering if anyone in the world would choose him. If you'd been in Danielle's position, would you have agreed right away, or would you have needed time to think? Tell us in the comments. "I'll read the letter tonight," Danielle finally said. "I'll look at the photos. I'll think about this seriously." "That's all I'm asking," Rick replied, visibly exhausted from the conversation. But as Danielle turned to leave, Rick called out one more time. "Officer Monroe? Danielle?" She turned back. "Thank you," he said simply, "for listening, for considering, for being the kind of person who doesn't automatically say no to loving someone who needs it." Danielle nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and walked out of that hospital room carrying 2 envelopes and a decision that would change at least 2 lives forever, maybe 3, if she counted herself. That night, Danielle sat at her kitchen table in the small house she'd bought in 2010, a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors still waved and kids still rode bikes before dinner. The house was neat, functional, empty in the way homes become when one person lives alone for too long. She'd made tea she wasn't drinking, turned on music she wasn't hearing, stared at 2 envelopes like they might suddenly provide answers through osmosis. Finally, at nearly midnight, she opened the personal envelope. Inside were 3 things: Rick's letter, Marcus's unsent letter to his father, and 5 photographs of a boy who looked simultaneously young and ancient. Cameron. Danielle studied the photos first, her hands trembling slightly. He was beautiful, dark skin like polished mahogany, eyes that held depths no 8-year-old should possess, hair cut close in a practical style that suggested foster families working on tight budgets. In one photo, he was attempting to smile for the camera, but the smile didn't reach those haunted eyes. In another, he was reading a book, completely absorbed, his small body curled into itself protectively. But it was the 3rd photo that broke something in Danielle's chest. Cameron standing in a bedroom that was clearly temporary. Generic furniture, no personal items visible. Nothing that said, "This is yours. This is home." He was holding a stuffed animal that looked well-loved, worn from years of being clutched during nightmares and lonely nights. The expression on his face was careful, guarded, the look of a child who'd learned not to get comfortable because comfort was always temporary. Danielle recognized that look. She'd seen it on countless kids in her 20-plus years in the system. Children who'd learned that love was conditional, that belonging was fragile, that adults made promises they rarely kept. She set the photos down carefully and picked up Marcus's letter. "Dear Dad, I don't know if I'll ever send this. Don't know if you'd read it if I did. Don't know if it matters anymore after all these years. I'm 32 years old, and I just realized I'm the same age you were when you had me. Mom told me that once, before she died. Said you were young, ambitious, scared. Said she didn't tell you because she didn't want to trap you. I used to hate you for that. Used to think you knew and didn't care. Finding out you never knew somehow made it worse, because it meant there was no villain, no simple story, just circumstances and choices, and 2 lives that never connected. I have a son now. Cameron. He's 6, and he's everything good I've never been. Smart, curious, gentle. He asks questions I don't know how to answer, like, why don't I have a grandpa? And, will you always be here? I lie to him about the second question. Tell him yes, always, forever. But the truth is, I'm drowning, Dad. In debt, in addiction, in systems designed to keep people like us underwater. I'm trying to be better than you were, present, involved, sober. Most days I succeed. Some days I fail spectacularly. Here's what I understand now. Being a parent means carrying weight you never asked for and loving someone more than you love survival itself. It means making impossible choices between rent and medicine, between pride and asking for help, between staying and running when everything becomes too much. I don't know if you're a good man or a bad man, but I know Cameron deserves better than what I'm giving him. Better than foster care if something happens to me. Better than the cycle that destroyed our family before we even became one. So I'm writing this letter I'll probably never send, to a father I've never met, about a grandson you don't know exists. Because maybe, somehow, if something happens to me, someone will find this. Someone will tell you. And you'll do what you couldn't do for me. Protect him. Give him the chance we never had. His full name is Cameron Marcus Holloway. He lives with me in Austin, Texas. He likes books about space and hates broccoli. He draws pictures of families that include a dad and a grandpa and sometimes a mom, even though Shanice left years ago. He's waiting for a future that's bigger than this apartment and these struggles. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. And Cameron needs someone to fight for him. Someone with resources, with connections, with the ability to give him more than survival. I'm asking you, Dad, not as your son, because we were never that, but as Cameron's father, the only thing I've ever been good at. Please don't let him disappear into a system that doesn't see him. Please give him what you couldn't give me. He deserves to be more than we were. Marcus Danielle read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, blurring the ink in places where Marcus's own tears had already stained the paper. Then she picked up Rick's letter. Dear Danielle, if you're reading this, you've seen the photos. You've seen what I'm asking you to protect. You've probably also read Marcus's letter and understand the weight of generational failure that led to this moment. I won't insult you with platitudes about everything happening for a reason or this being destiny. The truth is messier. I failed my son by not knowing he existed. He failed himself by letting demons win battles he could have survived. And now, Cameron stands at a crossroads that will determine whether this family's story ends in tragedy or transformation. You asked me earlier why I chose you. Let me be clear. This isn't about convenience or desperation. I've had 6 months to research options, to consider every alternative. I could leave Cameron to the state and trust they'll find him a good home. Statistics say they probably won't. Black boys in foster care have some of the worst outcomes in the system. I could establish guardianship through my lawyers, create a trust-managed arrangement with hired caregivers. But money doesn't heal trauma. Professionals don't provide the unconditional love that children need to believe they're worth fighting for. I chose you, Danielle Monroe, because over 3 months of conversations, I've seen your heart. You think you hide it behind that badge and that professional demeanor, but you don't. Every time you talk about your mother, about the injustices you see daily, about the children failed by systems designed to process rather than protect, your heart shows. You're terrified. Good. That means you understand the stakes. You're doubtful. Also good. That means you won't go into this with naive optimism. But most importantly, you're considering it. Which means, somewhere inside you, there's a woman who believes love matters more than comfort, who believes one child saved is worth any sacrifice, who believes Patricia Monroe's legacy deserves to continue. Here's what I'm offering. Financial support through trusts that will ensure Cameron never lacks for material needs. Legal assistance to navigate adoption, schooling, everything. A network of resources, therapists, tutors, mentors, all pre-arranged and prepaid. But here's what I'm asking. Your time. Your patience. Your willingness to love a child who will test every boundary because he's learned that people leave. Your commitment to showing up, even on days when you question everything, even when he pushes you away, because pushing people away has been his survival mechanism. I'm asking you to be the mother Cameron needs, which means being imperfect and present instead of perfect and absent. My lawyers need an answer by Monday. The paperwork is ready. If you agree, we can start the process immediately. You could meet Cameron by mid-month, Begin supervised visits. Start building the relationship that will carry him through whatever comes next. If you say no, I'll understand. This is enormous, life-altering, possibly the hardest thing anyone's ever asked of you. But if you say yes, you'll be giving Cameron something I never gave Marcus, a chance. Not a guarantee. Life doesn't work that way. But a fighting chance at stability, at love, at believing he matters to someone. And selfishly, you'll be giving me something too. Peace. The ability to close my eyes for the last time, knowing I didn't fail completely, knowing that even though I can't undo the past, I helped create a better future for one child who carries my blood and deserves the world. The choice is yours, Officer Monroe. But know this, whatever you decide, I'm grateful we met. You reminded me that goodness still exists in unexpected places, that connections can form across the most unlikely circumstances, and that it's never too late to try doing something right. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering. Thank you for being exactly who you are. With respect and hope, Richard Holloway. Danielle set the letter down with shaking hands. The kitchen clock read 1:47 a.m. She had approximately 60 hours to make a decision that would define the rest of her life. She stood, paced to the spare bedroom she'd been using for storage. Boxes of old case files, exercise equipment she rarely used, remnants of a marriage that felt like someone else's memory. The room had good light, faced the backyard where a tire swing still hung from the oak tree previous owners had installed for children who'd long since grown. Could this be Cameron's room? The thought terrified her. Danielle pulled out her phone, stared at it for 10 minutes, then finally called the one person whose opinion mattered. Her grandmother, Esther, now 91 and living in an assisted care facility in Houston, answered on the fourth ring with the clarity that sometimes comes to the very old at strange hours. "Baby girl," Esther's voice came through, warm as summer. "It's nearly 2 in the morning. You only call this late when your soul's wrestling with something." "Grandma," Danielle breathed, and suddenly she was crying. Deep, gasping sobs she'd been holding back for hours. "I need your wisdom." "Then tell me what's breaking your heart." So Danielle did. Told her everything. Rick, Marcus, Cameron, the letters, the photos, the impossible decision sitting on her kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Esther listened without interrupting, the way she always had, the way that made you feel heard even through silence. When Danielle finally finished, her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. "You remember what I told you when your mama died?" Esther finally asked. "You said grief is love with nowhere to go." "That's right. And you've been carrying grief and love around for 15 years, putting it into your work, into helping people you'll never see again, into a system that breaks your heart daily. But love isn't meant to be scattered like that, baby. Sometimes it needs a specific place to land." "I'm scared, Grandma. What if I'm not good enough? What if I damage him worse? What if you save him?" Esther countered. "What if that child is supposed to be yours, and this whole impossible situation is life's way of bringing y'all together?" That sounds like destiny talk. Call it what you want. I call it recognizing when God, or the universe, or whatever you believe in, puts someone in your path and says, "Here, this one's yours to protect." You think your mama wasn't terrified when she had you? Single, working herself to death, trying to give you better than she had? Fear doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes fear means you love something before you even hold it. Danielle pressed her palm against the spare bedroom wall, imagining it painted a different color, filled with books and toys, and the life sounds of a child learning he was safe. The practical part of me says this is insane, Danielle admitted. The practical part of you became a black female cop in Texas, Esther replied with a dry laugh. Practical left the building decades ago, baby. You've always led with your heart, even when you pretended otherwise. What if I fail him the way the system failed his father? Then you'll fail, knowing you tried, which is better than spending the rest of your life wondering, what if? But Danielle, you won't fail. Not because you're perfect, but because you're the kind of woman who calls her 91-year-old grandmother at 2 a.m. asking for permission to love a child. That's not the behavior of someone who fails people. Danielle slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, phone pressed to her ear, imagining Esther in her small apartment 70 miles away, probably sitting in her favorite chair with the lamp on. The same lamp she'd read to Danielle under when she was small. I wish Mama was here, Danielle whispered. She is, Esther said firmly. She's in every instinct telling you to say yes. She's in that conscience that won't let you walk away from a child who needs you. Patricia Monroe worked herself into an early grave so you could have choices. This is you honoring that sacrifice by choosing love over comfort. When did you get so wise? Baby, I was born wise. You're just finally old enough to listen. They talked for another hour, about logistics, about fear, about the way life sometimes asks impossible things and expects you to figure it out anyway. When they finally hung up, dawn was beginning to gray the kitchen windows. Danielle made coffee, showered, dressed for her Saturday shift. Yes, she was working weekends now, covering for a colleague whose daughter was sick. At the prison, everything felt simultaneously normal and completely different. She went through security, checked her assignments, and found herself walking toward the medical unit, even though she wasn't scheduled for Rick's detail today. Lieutenant Barnes caught her in the hallway. Monroe, you're not on the schedule for Holloway today. I know, sir. I just need 5 minutes. There's something I need to tell him. Barnes studied her face, reading something there that made him nod slowly. 5 minutes. And Monroe, whatever you're deciding, make sure it's for the right reasons. What are the right reasons, sir? The ones you can live with at 3 a.m. when everything's hard and you're questioning yourself. Danielle found Rick awake, but barely. His skin grayer than yesterday, his breathing labored. The doctors had adjusted his medication. She could see it in the slack way he held himself, the distance in his eyes. He focused when he saw her, though, a flicker of desperate hope crossing his face. Officer Monroe, he managed. I didn't expect... I read everything, Danielle interrupted, pulling a chair close. The letters, looked at the photos, talked to my grandmother, spent all night thinking. And? Danielle took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, understanding that what she said next would ripple through decades, would touch lives she couldn't predict, would define her in ways she couldn't imagine. I have questions, she began. Lots of them. About Cameron's trauma, about what he's been told, about the transition process, about therapy, about schooling, about everything. Rick's face began to fall. But, Danielle continued, her voice strengthening, I'm not asking these questions to find reasons to say no. I'm asking because I need to know how to say yes correctly. The beeping of Rick's heart monitor accelerated slightly as her words registered. You're saying, I'm saying I'll do it, Danielle said, tears streaming down her face, a smile breaking through despite her fear. I'll adopt Cameron. I'll become his mother. I'll fight for him the way your son asked someone to fight, the way my mother fought for me. Rick's entire body seemed to release tension, she hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Tears flowed freely down his weathered face, and his hand reached for hers with surprising strength. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "I'm terrified," Danielle admitted, gripping his hand back. "Good," Rick managed through tears. "That means you understand how precious this is." They sat like that for several minutes. A dying millionaire and a corrections officer. Two people who should never have mattered to each other. Bound together by their commitment to a child neither had met, but both already loved. Finally, Rick released her hand and reached for the call button. "My lawyer," he said. "We need to call my lawyer immediately. Start the paperwork today. I don't know how much time I have left, and I need to see this in motion before—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Within an hour, Rick's legal team was on a conference call. Danielle listened as they explained the process. Background checks she'd already passed through her job, home studies that would be expedited given the circumstances, court appearances that would be scheduled rapidly. Given Mr. Holloway's health situation and Officer Monroe's credentials, we're confident we can move this through the system in 2 to 3 weeks, the lead attorney explained. Normally, adoption takes months, sometimes years, but these are exceptional circumstances. "When can I meet him?" Danielle asked, the question feeling surreal even as she spoke it. "We'll arrange a visit this week," the attorney replied. "Supervised initially so Cameron can meet you in a safe environment. The foster family has been briefed about the possibility of a private adoption arrangement. They're supportive. They care about Cameron deeply, but knew from the beginning their placement was temporary." What has Cameron been told about his grandfather? Danielle needed to know. There was a pause. Then the attorney said carefully, "He knows his father had a father he never met. He knows that grandfather is very ill. He's been told that his grandfather wants to make sure he's taken care of. But the details, about you, about the adoption, we've waited to discuss until we knew you'd agreed." "So he doesn't know about me yet?" "Not yet. We thought it would be cruel to tell him someone might adopt him and then have that fall through. Children in foster care often face broken promises. We wanted to be certain before raising his hopes." Danielle understood that logic, even as it made her heart ache for Cameron, waiting, not knowing his future was being decided in hospital rooms and legal offices by people he'd never met. "I want to meet him as soon as possible," Danielle said firmly. "This week. Tomorrow, if we can arrange it." "I'll make the calls," the attorney promised. "Officer Monroe, there's one more thing. Mr. Holloway has prepared a video message for Cameron, to be shown when he's older, when he can understand. He'd like you to be present when it's recorded, so Cameron can see that the two of you were united in wanting what's best for him." Danielle looked at Rick, who nodded weakly. "When?" she asked. "Today, if Mr. Holloway is strong enough. We have videographers on standby." "I'm strong enough," Rick said with determination that belied his physical state. "I need to do this now. Need Cameron to know someday that someone fought for him, that his grandfather's last act was love, even if it came too late for his father." The video recording happened that afternoon. Rick, propped up as much as possible, spoke directly to the camera, with Danielle sitting beside him, her hand resting on the bed rail in a gesture that would tell future Cameron they were united. "Cameron," Rick began, his voice steady despite obvious pain. "My name is Richard Holloway, and I'm your grandfather. By the time you see this, I'll be gone, and I'm so sorry for that. Sorry I never got to meet you, never got to take you fishing or teach you about business or just sit with you while you read those books I'm told you love." He paused, gathering strength. "I failed your father. Didn't know he existed until it was too late to make it right. But I'm not going to fail you. The woman sitting beside me, Officer Danielle Monroe, has agreed to become your mother. Not just legally, though lawyers will make that official, but truly. She's going to love you, protect you, fight for you. Rick's voice cracked, but he continued. You're going to have hard days, Cameron. Days when you miss your dad, when you're angry at the world, when you wonder why life had to be this hard. On those days, I want you to remember something. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are loved intentionally, chosen deliberately, wanted completely. Tears streamed down Rick's face, matched by tears on Danielle's. Your father wrote me a letter before he died. In it, he said you deserve to be more than we were. He was right. And with Danielle as your mother, with the resources I'm leaving behind, with the opportunities ahead of you, you will be. Not because you're better than us, but because you'll have what we didn't. Someone who refuses to give up on you. Rick turned slightly, looking at Danielle. Take care of him, he said, speaking to her now instead of the camera. Love him through the hard parts. Remind him he matters when he forgets. Be the parent I couldn't be. The one Marcus tried to be, the one Cameron deserves. I promise, Danielle said, her voice thick with emotion. Rick turned back to the camera for his final words. Cameron Marcus Holloway, you are my legacy. Not the money, not the businesses I built, but you. Be good, be kind, be more than we were. And know that somewhere, across time and circumstance, your grandfather loved you enough to make sure you'd be safe. The camera stopped recording. Rick collapsed back against his pillows, exhausted but peaceful. Thank you, he whispered to Danielle. For everything. I haven't done anything yet, she replied. You said yes, Rick corrected. In a world that makes it so easy to say no, to protect yourself, to choose comfort over courage. You said yes. That's everything. What would you do if you had 3 days to make a life-changing decision? Would fear stop you, or would you leap anyway? Share your thoughts below. As Danielle left the prison that evening, her phone buzzed with a text from Rick's attorney. Foster family in Austin has agreed to a meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. You'll meet Cameron. Supervised visit, 1 hour. Are you ready? Danielle stared at the message for a long moment, her finger hovering over the reply button. Was she ready to meet the child who would call her mother? Ready to look into eyes that had seen too much loss? Ready to begin a relationship built on trauma and hope in equal measure? No. She wasn't ready. But she typed back anyway. I'll be there. Because ready or not, Cameron needed her. And she'd already decided that his needs mattered more than her fears. Sunday afternoon found Danielle parked outside a modest home in a quiet Austin suburb, gripping her steering wheel like it might anchor her to reality. She'd driven 2 hours, rehearsing what to say, how to act, what to do with her hands. Every scenario she'd imagined felt inadequate. The house was painted pale yellow with white trim, the kind of home that whispered, safe, without shouting it. A small garden grew along the walkway, vegetables and flowers mixed together, suggesting people who valued both beauty and practicality. A basketball hoop hung over the garage, slightly crooked but well used. Rick's attorney, Patricia Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, met Danielle at the door. Officer Monroe, thank you for coming. The Johnsons are lovely people. They've been fostering for 12 years, have helped transition dozens of children. They're rooting for this to work. And Cameron? Danielle asked, her voice barely steady. He's nervous, Patricia admitted. He's been told a woman wants to meet him, someone his grandfather arranged. He knows it's possible she might become his permanent family. But he's also learned not to trust possibilities. Children in his situation develop protective mechanisms. Meaning he might reject me. Meaning he might test you, Patricia corrected gently. See if you're real, if you'll stay when things get difficult. It's not personal. It's survival. The front door opened, revealing a black woman in her mid-50s with graying locks and a warm smile that didn't quite hide her concern. I'm Denise Johnson, she introduced herself. This is my husband, Marcus. Danielle's breath caught at the name, same as both Cameron's father and her ex-husband. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Marcus Johnson was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of steady presence that suggested years of parenting children who needed patience more than authority. Come in, Denise invited. Cameron's in the living room. We told him someone special wanted to meet him, that she might become his new mom. He's processing. The living room was cozy, worn furniture that prioritized comfort over style, walls covered with photos of children at various ages, all races, all smiling. Evidence of the dozens of lives the Johnsons had touched. And there, sitting on the edge of the couch with that same stuffed animal from the photos clutched in his lap, was Cameron. He was smaller than Danielle had imagined, more fragile. His dark eyes watched her with an intensity that felt like being measured and found potentially wanting, all in a single glance. Hey, Cameron, Danielle said, keeping her distance, letting him control the space. I'm Danielle. Ms. Monroe to you, Denise corrected automatically, and Danielle appreciated her maintaining structure even in this strange situation. Ms. Monroe, Cameron repeated quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Danielle sat in the chair across from him, not on the couch where she might invade his space. Gave him room to breathe, room to decide. I bet this is weird, she said honestly. Meeting a stranger who might become your mom. I'd be freaking out if I were you. Something flickered in Cameron's eyes. Surprise, maybe, that an adult admitted this was strange instead of pretending it was normal. Are you freaking out? He asked, his voice a little stronger. Completely, Danielle admitted with a small smile. My hands are shaking. See? She held them out, and they were indeed trembling slightly. Cameron studied her hands, then met her eyes again. Why do you want to be my mom? The question, so direct, so vulnerable, hit Danielle in the chest. She could have given him easy answers. Because your grandfather asked. Because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve a family. But Cameron had been lied to by omission too many times. He deserved truth, even when truth was complicated. Honestly, Danielle began, I didn't know I wanted to be anyone's mom until 3 days ago. I'd kind of given up on that idea. But then your grandfather told me about you, showed me your pictures, and something inside me just knew that maybe we're supposed to find each other. Two people who both know what it's like when life doesn't go the way it should. My dad died, Cameron said flatly, testing her with the hard truth. I know. I'm sorry. And my mom left when I was little. I know that too. That must hurt. And my grandfather is dying, and I never even met him. Yeah, Danielle said softly. That's a lot of loss for one person, especially someone your age. Cameron's grip on the stuffed animal tightened. So why would you want me? I'm just a kid nobody wanted to keep. The words, delivered with such matter-of-fact pain, nearly broke Danielle's composure. but she held steady, understanding this was the test. Would she flinch from his wounds, or would she prove she could handle them? Cameron, people leaving you wasn't about you being unwantable, Danielle said firmly. Your mom left because she was struggling with things that had nothing to do with how lovable you are. Your dad died because addiction is a disease that kills people, and your grandfather never knew you existed until recently, and he's spent every moment since trying to make sure you're protected. None of that means you're not worth keeping. It means life is sometimes really unfair. Cameron stared at her for a long moment, and she could almost see him processing, deciding whether to believe her. What if you change your mind? He asked finally. What if you take me home and then decide I'm too much trouble? Then I'll figure it out, Danielle answered honestly. Because that's what mothers do. They figure it out. They don't give up just because things get hard. My mom worked 2 jobs and still showed up to every school event. She was exhausted all the time, but she never once made me feel like I was too much trouble. And that's the kind of mom I want to be for you. Your mom sounds nice. She was the best. She died when I was 19. Cameron's eyes widened slightly. You don't have a mom either? Not anymore. But I had her long enough to learn what real love looks like, long enough to want to pass that forward. They sat in silence for a moment, both carrying the weight of mothers lost in different ways. What's your favorite book? Danielle asked, shifting to safer ground. Cameron's face brightened slightly. A Wrinkle in Time. Have you read it? Years ago. Remind me what happens? And just like that, Cameron began to talk. Hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. About tesseracts and time travel. About Meg Murray and her search for her father. About the darkness threatening to consume everything. Danielle listened, genuinely interested, asking questions that showed she was paying attention. And slowly, incrementally, Cameron's body language shifted. The death grip on the stuffed animal loosened. His posture relaxed slightly. He made eye contact more frequently. After 30 minutes, Denise brought in lemonade and cookies, and Cameron automatically took one, offering the plate to Danielle first, a gesture of learned politeness that suggested the Johnsons had taught him well. Cameron, can I ask you something? Danielle ventured. He nodded, cookie halfway to his mouth. If I become your mom, and I really hope I do, what would you want our life to look like? What matters to you? Cameron thought carefully, taking the question seriously. I want to stay in school, he said finally. I'm in 3rd grade, and I like my teacher. I'm not dumb, even though some kids think I am because I've missed a lot of school. You're not dumb at all, Danielle said firmly. You're brilliant. Anyone who loves A Wrinkle in Time is brilliant. A small smile tugged at Cameron's lips. And I want... He hesitated, then continued. I want to not have to move again. I've lived in 5 places since my dad died. I'm tired of packing boxes and learning new rules and trying to figure out where I fit. If you come live with me, you won't have to move again, Danielle promised. I have a house with a yard and a tire swing and a bedroom that could be yours. For real. Permanently. Can I bring Mr. Whiskers? Cameron held up the stuffed animal, apparently a cat, though it had been loved into ambiguity. Mr. Whiskers absolutely has to come, Danielle said seriously. He looks very important. My dad gave him to me when I was 4, Cameron explained quietly, before things got bad. Before the addiction consumed Marcus, before everything fell apart. The unspoken words hung between them. Then he's definitely family, Danielle affirmed. They talked for another 20 minutes, about school, about favorite foods, Cameron liked tacos but hated mushrooms. About hobbies, drawing and reading and wanting to learn basketball, but never having anyone to teach him. About small daily things that would matter enormously when they became routines. Finally, Patricia Chen gently interrupted. I hate to cut this short, but we're at our 1-hour limit for the initial visit. Cameron's face fell slightly, a look that suggested he'd started to hope and now feared this was the end. Can I come back? Danielle asked, directing the question to Patricia but watching Cameron. Absolutely. We can schedule visits throughout this week while the paperwork processes. Tomorrow? Danielle asked. And the day after? And every day until I can take him home? Cameron's head snapped up, eyes wide. Really? Really? Danielle confirmed. If that's okay with you. Yeah, Cameron whispered. Yeah, that would be okay. As Danielle stood to leave, Cameron suddenly jumped up, and before anyone could react, wrapped his arms around her waist in a fierce hug. Danielle froze for half a second, then hugged him back, feeling his small body shake slightly against her, feeling the years of loneliness and loss compressed into that desperate embrace. Thank you for coming, Cameron whispered into her shirt. Thank you for not being scared of me. Danielle felt tears burning her eyes but blinked them back. Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after, and every day you need me. When Cameron finally released her, his eyes were wet, but clearer somehow, like a door had opened that he'd kept locked for self-protection. Danielle said her goodbyes to the Johnsons, confirmed tomorrow's visit time, and somehow made it to her car before the tears came in earnest. She sat in the driver's seat, phone in shaking hands, and called Rick. He answered immediately, his voice weak but alert. How did it go? He hugged me, Danielle managed through tears. Rick, he hugged me, and I felt his whole heart in that hug, all the hope and fear and desperation for someone to stay. He's perfect. He's broken and perfect, and I already love him. She heard Rick crying on the other end. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for seeing him, for not running from his pain. I'm coming back to the prison tonight, Danielle said. I need to tell you about him. Need you to know who he is before... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'd like that, Rick said softly. I'd like that very much. That evening, Danielle sat by Rick's bedside and told him everything about Cameron's questions, his fears, his love of books, his desire for stability. She showed Rick photos she'd taken on her phone, with the Johnsons' permission. Cameron showing her his favorite drawing, Cameron laughing at something Marcus Johnson said, Cameron waving goodbye at the door. Rick studied each photo like it was precious art, tears streaming steadily down his face. He looks like Marcus, Rick whispered. Same eyes, same way of holding himself, like he's trying to take up less space. He's going to be okay, Danielle promised. I'm going to make sure of it. I know you will. Rick's hand found hers. Danielle, I need to tell you something. The doctors think I have maybe a week, possibly less. The cancer is moving faster than expected. Danielle's breath caught. Rick, it's okay, he interrupted gently. I'm ready. I've made my peace. But I need to know, will the adoption go through in time? Will it be official before? I don't know, Danielle admitted. The lawyers said 2 to 3 weeks, but we'll start the process immediately. And even if the legal part takes time, Cameron and I have already started. He's already mine in every way that matters. Rick nodded, seeming satisfied with that. There's one more thing, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Something I haven't told anyone, something that will shock even you. But you need to know before I'm gone, need to understand the full picture. Danielle leaned closer. What is it? Rick took a labored breath, gathering strength for whatever revelation he'd been carrying. The money I'm leaving for Cameron, the trusts, the education funds, all of it, totals about $12 million. Danielle's eyes widened. She'd known Rick was wealthy, but that number was staggering. But that's not the shocking part, Rick continued. The shocking part is where some of that money came from. He paused, and Danielle felt her stomach tighten with sudden apprehension. You were convicted of fraud, she said slowly. Everyone knows that. You stole from investors. I was convicted, Rick confirmed, but not everything the prosecution claimed was true. Some of the money they said I stole, I actually found, discovered by accident during an audit. It was money that had been embezzled decades earlier by someone else, hidden in accounts that no one had touched in 20 years. Rick, I didn't report it, he admitted, shame evident in his voice. I should have, but I didn't. I was angry at a system that had spent my whole life making things harder for people like me. So I took it, moved it quietly, carefully, into accounts I could access. It wasn't the 40 million they claimed. It was about 8 million. And I convinced myself I deserved it. That it was compensation for every racist slight, every time I'd had to be twice as good for half the recognition. Danielle sat back, processing this confession. So you were guilty, she said quietly. Not of everything they charged you with, but of something. Yes, Rick confirmed. And I've spent my time in prison understanding that my justifications don't matter. Theft is theft, even when you convince yourself you're stealing from people who don't deserve it, even when you tell yourself you're owed it. Why are you telling me this now? Rick met her eyes directly. Because Cameron's inheritance includes that money, and you need to know what you're accepting. You need to know that while I'm trying to do something good now, it's built partly on something wrong I did then. If someone gave you millions to help a child, but you learned it came from morally complicated sources, would you accept it? Let us know in the comments what you'd do. Danielle stood, paced to the window, stared out at nothing. The courts never recovered that money? She asked. No, it was too well hidden. When they convicted me, they based it on other evidence, documents they could prove, investors who testified. But those original 8 million? Still in accounts they never found, now legally transferred to trusts for Cameron. So I could report it, Danielle said slowly. Could tell the authorities, could have that money seized. You could, Rick agreed, and I wouldn't blame you. But if you did, Cameron loses the future I'm trying to give him, loses the college education, the stability, the opportunities, and the money goes back into a system that will redistribute it to investors who are already wealthy, who will use it for third homes and stock portfolios. It was manipulative reasoning, and they both knew it. But it was also pragmatic. Danielle turned to face him. You're asking me to become complicit. I'm asking you to put Cameron first, Rick corrected quietly. I'm asking you to understand that justice isn't always simple. That sometimes doing the absolute right thing hurts innocent people, and that the world isn't black and white. I'm a cop, Rick. I've spent 23 years believing in the system. And I'm a dying man who spent 68 years learning that the system doesn't work equally for everyone. We're both right, and both wrong, and Cameron is caught in the middle, through no fault of his own. Danielle sank back into the chair, her head in her hands. Everything had seemed so clear an hour ago. She was rescuing a child, giving him a better life, doing something unquestionably good. But now she was being asked to accept money that was stolen, to build Cameron's future on Rick's crimes, to compromise her principles for practical outcomes. "I need time to think about this," she finally said. "You have until I die," Rick replied bluntly. "After that, the trusts activate automatically. The lawyers don't know the full story. They just know I'm leaving money to my grandson. But you know. And you get to decide whether Cameron's future is worth accepting a morally complicated past." Danielle stood to leave, her mind spinning. At the door, she turned back. "Rick, answer me honestly. If you could do it again, would you still take that money?" Rick was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said, "knowing what I know now, that it would cost me my freedom, my reputation, my chance to know my son, I wouldn't. But I can't undo it. I can only try to make sure something good comes from something wrong. That's all any of us can do. Try to make the next choice better than the last one." Danielle left the prison that night with more questions than answers, her certainty shaken, but her commitment to Cameron somehow even stronger. Because regardless of where the money came from, Cameron remained an innocent child who needed someone to fight for him. And Danielle was beginning to understand that sometimes loving someone meant accepting that perfection wasn't possible, that doing good sometimes required navigating gray areas, and that motherhood would require compromises she never imagined making. The question wasn't whether to love Cameron. The question was how much of her principles she was willing to bend to give him the future he deserved. And she had 1 week to decide. The week that followed felt like living in two realities simultaneously. In one reality, Danielle visited Cameron every single day, watched him slowly unfold like a flower that had been kept in darkness, petals opening hesitantly toward light. They read books together. She taught him card games her grandmother had taught her. He showed her drawings he'd made, families with stick figures holding hands, houses with too many windows because more windows means more light to see by. On Wednesday, Cameron asked if he could call her mom during their private moments, even though it wasn't official yet. Danielle had cried right there in the Johnsons' living room, and Cameron had looked terrified until she assured him those were happy tears. "I've never made anyone happy cry before," he'd said with wonder. "Get used to it," she'd replied, pulling him into a hug. "I'm an emotional person." But in the other reality, the one that kept Danielle awake at 3 a.m., staring at her ceiling, she was harboring knowledge of stolen money. $8 million that should belong to someone else, now designated for a child who had no idea his inheritance was built on theft. She'd researched obsessively, found articles about Rick's case, about the investors who'd lost money. Most were corporations, wealthy individuals who'd recovered through insurance claims and lawsuits. The justice system had moved on, but that didn't make it right. Thursday night, she sat in her kitchen with a glass of wine she wasn't drinking and her phone in her hand. Lieutenant Barnes's number pulled up. One call. That's all it would take. Report what Rick had told her. Let the system handle it. Clear her conscience. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She thought about Cameron's face when he'd asked if Mr. Whiskers could come to his new home. The way he'd tested her by saying he sometimes had nightmares and wet the bed. Would she still want him? And the relief in his eyes when she'd said everyone struggles with something, that love doesn't disappear over laundry. If she made this call, Cameron would still need a home. But the adoption would be delayed, complicated by investigations. The money would be frozen, seized. He'd lose the future Rick had tried to build for him. But he'd still have her. Right? Except she wasn't sure anymore. If she reported this, Would the courts still approve her adoption? Would they question her judgment, her fitness as a parent? Would they decide Cameron needed a less complicated situation? Her phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. The Johnsons had gotten him a cheap phone so they could stay in contact during the transition. "Good night, Mom. See you tomorrow." Just those simple words. Mom, tomorrow. The everyday language of family that he'd been denied for so long. Danielle set down the wine, put her phone away without making the call, and went to bed feeling like she'd lost something essential about herself. Friday brought worse news. Rick had declined rapidly. When Danielle arrived for her evening visit, she found his room full of medical staff, machines beeping urgently. They stabilized him, but the doctor pulled her aside afterward. "Days," he said quietly. "Maybe 72 hours. His body is shutting down faster than we anticipated." "The adoption isn't finalized," Danielle said, panic rising. "He wanted to know it was official before—" "I understand, but medicine doesn't wait for paperwork." Danielle called Patricia Chen immediately. "We need to accelerate everything. Rick has days, not weeks." "We're doing everything we can," Patricia assured her. "But the courts move at their own pace. Even expedited cases have requirements. The home study isn't complete. The psychological evaluation for Cameron isn't finished. We're cutting corners where legally possible, but it won't be done in time." "Probably not. I'm sorry, Danielle." When Danielle entered Rick's room after the medical staff left, he looked diminished. No other word for it. As though death was already erasing him, preparing to reclaim the space he occupied. "You look terrible," she said, sitting beside him, taking his hand. "Funny, I was going to say the same about you." His voice was barely a whisper, but the humor was still there. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." "The money," Rick guessed. "You're still wrestling with it." Danielle nodded, unable to lie to a dying man. "Have you decided what you'll do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to report it, clear my conscience, do the right thing. But then I think about Cameron losing opportunities because of choices you made, and it feels like he's being punished for your mistakes." "He is being punished," Rick said bluntly. "Every child who loses a parent is being punished for circumstances beyond their control. Every kid in foster care is being punished because adults failed them. The question isn't whether life is fair. It's not. The question is what you're going to do about the unfairness you have power to change. By accepting stolen money? By accepting that sometimes the only choices available are imperfect ones. By understanding that your principles are important, but so is an 8-year-old boy's future." Danielle pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. "You're manipulating me. Using Cameron to justify your crimes, to make me complicit." "Yes," Rick agreed, not flinching from the accusation. "I absolutely am. Because I'm dying, Danielle. And I don't have the luxury of philosophical debates about morality. I have hours to ensure that my grandson doesn't end up like my son, lost, alone, convinced the world has nothing good for him. So I'm supposed to compromise everything I believe in? No. You're supposed to decide what you believe in most. Is it abstract justice, or is it the concrete, specific love of one child who needs you?" Danielle felt tears streaming down her face. "I hate this. I hate that you've put me in this position. I know. I'm sorry. But hating it doesn't make the decision go away." She left the prison that night without resolution, drove straight to the Johnsons' house, even though it was late. Denise answered the door in a bathrobe, concern immediate on her face. "Danielle, what's wrong? Is Cameron asleep?" "Yes, about an hour ago." What's happened? Can I see him? Just for a minute? Denise studied her face, then nodded. Come on. She led Danielle upstairs to the small bedroom Cameron occupied. He was curled on his side, Mr. Whiskers tucked under his chin, a nightlight casting soft shadows across his peaceful face. Danielle stood in the doorway, watching him breathe, and felt something inside her crack open. This child, innocent, hopeful, already calling her mom in his heart, had no idea that his future hung in the balance of her moral crisis. He just knew that for the first time in his short, painful life, someone had chosen him. Someone had said, "You matter enough for me to rearrange my entire existence." Whatever you're wrestling with, Denise whispered beside her, remember that he's real, not theoretical, not a philosophical question, real. How do you do it? Danielle asked. Foster all these children, love them, let them go? By remembering that loving them matters more than keeping them, by understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do is be someone's safe place for as long as they need you. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail him? Then you'll fail him while trying your absolute hardest, which is better than most kids get. Danielle, I've watched you with Cameron this week. You're already his mother. The paperwork is just catching up to reality. They stood in silence, watching Cameron sleep. Finally, Danielle whispered, his grandfather is dying. Days, maybe hours. The adoption won't be finalized in time. Does Cameron know that his grandfather is dying? Yes. That the adoption might not happen? No. I couldn't tell him. Couldn't risk him thinking I might not come for him. Denise put a hand on Danielle's shoulder. Then don't risk it. Come for him. Whatever you're worried about, whatever complications exist, deal with them after. But don't let that boy lose another person who matters. Danielle nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Saturday morning brought the call she'd been dreading. Rick's attorney. He's asking for you. The medical team says it's time. Danielle arrived to find Rick barely conscious, surrounded by machines and the quiet sounds of a body giving up. She took his hand, and his eyes fluttered open. Danielle, I'm here. Cameron? Safe, happy, excited. I'm picking him up Monday for a full-day visit. The Johnsons are packing his things. He talks about his new room constantly. A smile ghosted across Rick's face. Good, that's good. Rick, I need to tell you something. Danielle leaned closer. About the money. I've decided. Don't. Rick interrupted weakly. Don't tell me. Whatever you decide, decide it after I'm gone. Don't let me die thinking I've corrupted you. Let me die believing you'll do what's right. How will I know what's right? You'll know, Rick whispered, because you're a better person than I ever was. Because you lead with your heart, even when your head argues. Because you're Patricia Monroe's daughter, and she didn't raise someone who abandons children. His breathing became more labored. Rick, wait. There's so much I need to ask you. About Cameron. About what to tell him when he's older. Tell him the truth, Rick managed. Tell him I failed his father but tried to save him. Tell him family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. Tell him. He struggled for breath. Tell him his grandfather loved him, even though we never met, even across time and circumstance. Tell him love counts, even when it comes too late to fix everything. Danielle was crying openly now. I'll tell him, I promise. And Danielle, thank you for giving an old criminal a chance to do something good before the end. for seeing past my mistakes to the person I wanted to be. You are that person, Danielle insisted. You're dying trying to protect your grandson. That's who you are. Rick's eyes closed. His breathing settled into a slow, irregular rhythm. Stay, he whispered. Don't want to die alone. I'm not going anywhere. And she didn't. Danielle sat beside Richard Holloway for the next 6 hours as his breathing slowed, as machines beeped their warnings, as nurses came and went with sympathetic faces. At 4:47 p.m. on Saturday, December 19th, Rick took his last breath, a small exhale that seemed almost peaceful. Danielle sat with his body for another 20 minutes, holding his cooling hand, crying for a man she'd known only 3 months, but who'd changed her entire life trajectory. Finally, she stood, kissed his forehead, and whispered, I'll take care of him. I swear I will. Outside the hospital room, Patricia Chen was waiting. I'm so sorry, Patricia said. I know you two had become close. The adoption, Danielle said numbly. What happens now? Without Rick alive to... Nothing changes legally, Patricia assured her. The paperwork was filed while he was alive. His death doesn't affect your petition. If anything, it might accelerate things. The courts often prioritize orphaned children. So Cameron and I are still moving forward. Home study next week, court date hopefully before New Year's. You're going to be his mother, Danielle. Rick made sure of that before he died. Danielle felt something inside her finally settle. Whatever moral questions remained about the money, whatever complications existed, one thing was certain. She was going to be Cameron's mother. Everything else she'd figure out. That night she called Cameron, heard his voice, bright and excited, telling her about a book he'd finished, about how Marcus Johnson had taught him a basketball move, about how he'd started packing Mr. Whiskers' things for the move. She didn't tell him about Rick. Not yet. Not over the phone. That conversation deserved to happen in person, where she could hold him through the grief. For now, she just listened to him talk about his future, their future, and felt her love for this child deepen with every word. Have you ever had to choose between what's legally right and what's right for someone you love? Share your experience below. Sunday morning, Danielle woke to her phone ringing, Patricia Chen sounding stressed. Danielle, we have a problem. Her stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Cameron's biological mother, Shanice. She's surfaced, and she's contesting the adoption. The world tilted sideways. What? She abandoned him when he was 2. She's been gone for 6 years. She has no right. She has legal rights as the biological parent, Patricia said grimly. She showed up at Child Protective Services yesterday, claiming she'd been trying to get clean, had been in rehab, is now stable. She's demanding custody. She can't just... After all this time, she can try. And the courts favor biological parents when possible. This complicates everything, Danielle. The adoption may be delayed indefinitely while they evaluate her petition. Danielle sank onto her couch, feeling her carefully constructed future crumbling. Does Cameron know? Not yet. CPS wants to arrange a supervised meeting between them before making any decisions. This will destroy him, Danielle whispered. He's finally feeling safe, finally believing someone wants him permanently. And now, I know. But this is the system. Sometimes biological parents reappear. Sometimes they've genuinely changed. We have to let it play out. After Patricia hung up, Danielle sat in her empty house, staring at nothing, feeling utterly helpless. Everything she'd promised Cameron, the permanence, the stability, The future was suddenly uncertain again, and she had no idea how to fight a mother who'd decided, 6 years too late, that she wanted her son back. Monday morning arrived with the weight of impossible decisions. Danielle hadn't slept, just paced her house, researching parental rights, adoption law, termination of custody. The legal landscape was brutal. Biological parents held enormous power, even after abandonment, especially if they could demonstrate rehabilitation. She was supposed to pick up Cameron for their all-day visit in 3 hours, was supposed to take him to the zoo to lunch, to start showing him his new neighborhood. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, trying to decide whether to cancel. The phone rang. Denise Johnson. Danielle, Cameron woke up asking about you. He's been ready since 6 a.m. Please tell me you're still coming. I don't know if I should, Danielle admitted. Patricia told you about Shanice? She did, and I understand you're scared. But that child has been abandoned enough. Don't abandon him before you even get started. I'm not abandoning him. I'm trying to protect him from getting hurt. When what? Denise interrupted firmly. When his mother shows up and magically transforms into Parent of the Year? Danielle, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen biological parents reappear dozens of times. Some have genuinely changed. Most haven't. Either way, Cameron needs someone steady while this plays out. Someone who doesn't disappear because things got complicated. Danielle closed her eyes. What if I fight for him and lose? What if I make him love me and then the courts give him back to Shanice? Then you'll have given him something precious. The experience of being chosen, of being loved fiercely, of mattering to someone. Even if he can't stay with you, that changes a child. Changes how they see themselves. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that kind of loss. Then find out. Because right now, a little boy is waiting for his almost mother to show up like she promised. And if you don't, you'll prove that adults can't be trusted. That promises are just pretty words. The call ended. Danielle sat for another 10 minutes, paralyzed by fear. Then she thought about Patricia Monroe, her mother, who'd worked double shifts, not because she was superhuman, but because her daughter needed her to be. Who'd shown up exhausted but present, tired but loving, struggling but refusing to quit. Danielle stood, grabbed her keys, and drove to Austin. Cameron must have been watching from the window because he burst out the front door before she even parked, running toward her car, with his backpack bouncing. Mr. Whiskers clutched under one arm, his face split by a smile so bright it hurt to witness. Mom, you came. I thought maybe you forgot. Danielle caught him as he launched himself at her, wrapping her arms around his small, solid body and breathing in the kid smell of him, shampoo and excitement and trust. I will never forget, she said fiercely into his hair. Never. Do you understand? Yes, Cameron said, squeezing tighter. Can we go now? Can we see the house? Can I see my room? Danielle looked over his head at Denise, who stood on the porch with tears streaming down her face, and mouthed, Thank you. The drive back to Dallas felt sacred. Cameron chattered nonstop, about books, about questions he'd been saving, about whether they could get a dog someday, maybe when things settled, about whether she liked pancakes, yes, especially with blueberries. When they pulled up to Danielle's house, Cameron went silent, staring through the window with wide eyes. This is it, he whispered. This is home, Danielle confirmed. She watched him take it in. The neat yard, the basketball hoop she'd had installed yesterday, the porch swing, the front door painted cheerful blue. It's perfect, Cameron breathed. Inside, Danielle had spent the weekend transforming the spare room. Fresh paint, a warm blue-gray Cameron had picked from samples during a previous visit. New furniture that would grow with him. Bookshelves already filling with novels and reference books. A desk positioned near the window for homework and drawing. Posters of space and planets and explorers. Cameron stood in the doorway, frozen. "This is mine?" His voice was tiny, disbelieving. "All yours. Your books can go on those shelves. Your drawings can cover those walls. Your clothes will go in that dresser. This is your space, Cameron. Your permanent space." He walked in slowly, touching things carefully, as though they might vanish. Sat on the bed, a twin with a comforter showing constellations. Looked up at Danielle with tears streaming down his face. "Nobody ever made me a room before." Danielle sat beside him, pulling him against her side. "Well, I did. Because you're my son, and sons deserve rooms that say, 'You belong here.'" Cameron cried then. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when hope becomes too big to contain. Danielle held him, letting him release years of uncertainty and fear. Letting him understand viscerally that someone had chosen him intentionally. When the tears subsided, Cameron wiped his face with his sleeve and said, "Can Mr. Whiskers go on the pillow?" "Mr. Whiskers goes wherever you want him." Cameron carefully positioned the stuffed cat on the pillow, adjusting it until it looked just right. Then he turned to Danielle with sudden seriousness. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always. Even if my birth mom comes back, even if she wants me, can I still choose you?" Danielle's heart cracked. He knew. Somehow he knew. "Did someone tell you about Shanice?" "I heard Ms. Patricia talking on the phone yesterday. She didn't know I was listening." Cameron's voice was carefully controlled. "Is she back? Does she want me now?" Danielle pulled him fully into her lap, even though he was getting big for it, and spoke directly to his face. "Yes, she's back, and we don't know yet what will happen. The courts will evaluate everything, where she's been, whether she's stable, what's best for you. What if they say I have to go with her? Then we'll deal with it together. I'll fight for you, Cameron, as hard as I can, for as long as I can. But I need you to understand something important. Whatever happens, the love between us doesn't go away. Even if geography separates us, even if circumstances get complicated. You're my son. That's not conditional on paperwork." "But I don't want her," Cameron said fiercely. "I want you. She left me. You chose me. Why doesn't that matter?" "It does matter, and the courts will consider what you want. But adults make this decision, not kids, because kids shouldn't have to carry that responsibility." Cameron was quiet for a long moment. Then, "If I have to see her, will you come with me?" "If they'll let me, absolutely. And if they won't, I'll be waiting right outside. You won't be alone in this, baby. I promise." He nodded against her shoulder, and they sat like that for several minutes, a mother and son, holding each other through uncertainty, finding strength in their imperfect, brand-new bond. The rest of the day unfolded with careful normalcy. They made lunch together, grilled cheese and tomato soup, simple and comforting. Danielle taught Cameron how to flip the sandwiches without burning them, and he took the task seriously, tongue between his teeth in concentration. They played basketball in the driveway. Cameron was terrible, but enthusiastic, laughing when the ball bounced off the rim, celebrating wildly when one shot finally went in. "I did it! Mom, did you see?" "I saw. You're a natural." "I'm really not," Cameron said with self-awareness that seemed beyond his years. "But it's fun trying." That evening, after dinner, Danielle finally told him about Rick. They sat on the porch swing, the December air cool but not uncomfortable, wrapped in a blanket together. Danielle had been dreading this conversation, but knew it couldn't wait. "Cameron, I need to tell you something about your grandfather." His body tensed slightly. "He died, didn't he?" "Yes, Saturday afternoon. I was with him." Cameron was quiet, processing. "Did it hurt?" "No, baby. He just got very tired, and then he went to sleep and didn't wake up. It was peaceful." "I never met him." "I know. He hated that. But he loved you anyway. Loved you so much that his last months were spent making sure you'd be safe and taken care of. Everything. This house, your room, the money for college, all of it was because he loved you. Even though he never met me? Especially because he never met you. He couldn't fix what happened with your dad, but he could try to give you a better future. That was his last wish, that you'd be loved and safe and have every opportunity." Cameron leaned against her, and she felt him shaking slightly. "I wish I could have met him, could have said thank you. He knows. I told him about you, about how smart you are, how kind, how much you love books. His last words were about you. He said to tell you that your grandfather loved you, even across time and circumstance." They rocked gently on the swing, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Mom?" Cameron said eventually. "Yeah? I'm sad he died, but I'm glad you were there. Glad he wasn't alone." "Me too, baby." "And Mom? Even if I have to see Shanice, even if things get weird, I'm still your son, right?" "Forever and always," Danielle confirmed. "Nothing changes that." Tuesday brought the meeting Danielle had been dreading. CPS had arranged for Cameron to see Shanice at their offices. Neutral territory, supervised, limited to 1 hour. Danielle dressed Cameron that morning in his favorite shirt, helped him comb his hair, saw the fear in his eyes that he was trying to hide. "Remember," she said, kneeling to his level, "you don't have to perform. You don't have to pretend to feel things you don't feel. Just be honest. If you're uncomfortable, say so. I'll be right outside the whole time." "What if I don't recognize her?" "You probably won't. You were very little when she left. That's okay. What if she's nice now? What if she really changed? Then we'll be happy she's doing better. But that doesn't mean you owe her anything, Cameron. Adults made choices that hurt you. You're not responsible for fixing their mistakes or making them feel better about the past." At the CPS office, Patricia Chen met them looking concerned. "Shanice is already here. She's nervous from what I can tell. Brought photos apparently, pictures from when Cameron was a baby." "How does she look?" Danielle asked. "Honestly, she looks like someone who's been through hell and crawled back out. Thin, tired, but clear-eyed. Could be genuine rehabilitation, could be temporary, hard to say." Cameron gripped Danielle's hand tighter. A social worker emerged from the meeting room. "Cameron, we're ready for you." Cameron looked up at Danielle with panic in his eyes. "You've got this," she said softly. "Be brave, be honest. I'm right here." He nodded, squared his small shoulders, and walked into that room with a courage that made Danielle's heart ache. She sat in the waiting area, leg bouncing anxiously, checking the clock every 30 seconds. Patricia sat beside her, working on her laptop, occasionally glancing over with sympathy. 45 minutes passed. Then suddenly shouting from inside the meeting room. A woman's voice. "He's my son! I gave birth to him! You can't just take him from me!" Cameron's voice, high and scared. "I don't want to go with you. I want to stay with Ms. Danielle." Danielle was on her feet and moving before conscious thought registered. She burst into the meeting room to find Cameron pressed against the far wall. The social worker trying to calm a woman who Danielle assumed was Shanice. Mid-30s, hair pulled back, wearing clothes that looked borrowed and too big. "Cameron," Danielle said firmly but calmly, and he ran to her immediately, wrapping himself around her legs. "I want to go home," he whispered into her hip. "Please, Mom, can we go home?" Shanice's eyes widened when Cameron called Danielle, "Mom." Something crumpled in her expression. Pain, maybe, or recognition of what she'd lost. "You can't just replace me," Shanice said, her voice breaking. "I'm his mother. I gave birth to him. You left him," Danielle said quietly but firmly, "when he was 2. You've been gone 6 years. Whatever your reasons, whatever you were going through. He was a baby, and you chose drugs over him. That's reality." "I was sick," Shanice shouted. "Addiction is a disease. You think I wanted to leave my son? You think that was easy?" "I think it was devastating," Danielle said, surprising everyone, including herself, with her compassion. "I think you were suffering, and I'm genuinely glad you're doing better. But Cameron has been suffering too. He's been bounced between homes, lost his father, spent years wondering why his mother didn't come back. And now, when he's finally feeling safe, you reappear. That's not fair to him." Shanice's face twisted with anguish. "So what am I supposed to do? Just walk away? Pretend I don't have a son?" "I don't know what you're supposed to do," Danielle admitted. "But I know what Cameron needs. Stability, safety. Someone who won't leave when things get hard. Can you promise him that? Can you guarantee you won't relapse? Won't disappear again? Won't break his heart a second time?" Silence fell over the room. Shanice sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "I can't promise that," she whispered. "I'm 3 months sober, 3 months out of rehab. I'm living in a halfway house, working part-time, going to meetings every day. I'm trying. But I can't promise I won't fail." The honesty shocked everyone. Danielle knelt beside Shanice's chair, still holding Cameron's hand. "Then let him have what you can't give him right now. Let him be safe and loved while you continue getting strong. If you really love him, truly love him, you'll want what's best for him more than what makes you feel better." Shanice looked at her son, who was half hidden behind Danielle, tears streaming down his small face. "Baby, I'm so sorry," Shanice said. "I'm sorry I left. Sorry I wasn't strong enough. Sorry you had to suffer because of my weakness." Cameron didn't respond, just pressed closer to Danielle. The social worker intervened gently. "Perhaps we should end today's session. This is emotionally overwhelming for everyone." As they prepared to leave, Shanice called out, "Cameron?" He turned slightly. "I love you. I always loved you, even when I was too sick to show it." Cameron stared at her for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet, Danielle barely heard it, "Then prove it by letting me go." In the car afterward, Cameron cried, deep, gasping sobs that sounded like they'd been held inside for years. Danielle pulled over in a parking lot, climbed into the back seat, and held him while he released everything. When the tears finally subsided, Cameron looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "Is it bad that I don't want her? Is something wrong with me?" "Nothing is wrong with you," Danielle said fiercely. "You're protecting yourself, which is smart and healthy. Love isn't automatic just because someone shares your DNA. Love is built through presence, through showing up, through proving you're trustworthy. Shanice didn't do that. I'm trying to. You get to decide who earns your trust. What happens now? Now the courts evaluate everything. But Cameron, I need you to know something. Watching you in that room, watching you be honest about what you need, I have never been more proud to be your mother. You were so brave. I was scared. Brave people are always scared. They just don't let fear stop them from telling the truth. If you were a judge, would you prioritize biological connection or proven stability? Tell us what you think matters most for children. That night, after Danielle dropped Cameron back at the Johnsons', his official move-in still pending court approval, she received a call from Patricia Chen. You need to know something. After you left, Shanice spoke with the social workers privately. And she's withdrawing her petition for custody. Danielle's breath caught. What? She said watching Cameron with you showed her what real mothering looks like. Said she can't compete with that, can't offer him what you're offering. She's not contesting the adoption anymore. Relief flooded through Danielle so intensely she had to sit down. Is she okay? As okay as someone can be after giving up their child. But Danielle, she did something remarkable today. She chose her son's needs over her own wants. That's the most loving thing a parent can do. After the call ended, Danielle sat in her quiet house and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming recognition that sometimes the hardest moments crack open to reveal grace. Shanice had loved Cameron enough to let him go. Rick had loved Cameron enough to ensure his future. And Danielle loved Cameron enough to fight for him against impossible odds. 3 different kinds of love, all pointed toward one child's well-being. Maybe that's what family really meant. Not perfection, but the willingness to sacrifice for each other's good. Friday morning, Christmas Eve, Danielle received the call that changed everything. The court has expedited your case, Patricia Chen said, her voice bright with excitement. Given Rick's death, Shanice's withdrawal, Cameron's expressed preferences, and your stellar background, the judge is granting the adoption, emergency decree. It's official as of today. Today? Danielle couldn't process the words. Cameron is mine. Officially? Officially. Permanently. Legally. Cameron Marcus Monroe is your son. Merry Christmas, Danielle. She hung up and immediately called the Johnsons. I'm coming to get him. Today. Now. He's coming home. An hour later, Danielle pulled up to the yellow house where Cameron had been waiting, hoping, trying to trust that this time would be different. She didn't even make it to the door before he came flying out. The Johnsons behind him, with his boxes and bags and Mr. Whiskers. Mom, Miss Patricia called. She said, You're mine, Danielle said, catching him, spinning him around. You're my son, forever. The court said yes. We're official. We're family. Cameron screamed with pure joy, a sound so full of hope and relief that everyone watching started crying. Denise Johnson hugged them both. Take care of each other, she whispered. We will, Danielle promised. They loaded Cameron's belongings into the car. Not much. Everything he owned fit in 3 boxes and 2 bags. But it didn't matter. He was coming home with the only things that really counted. Love, hope, and someone who'd chosen him permanently. As they drove back to Dallas, Cameron chattered excitedly about Christmas, about his room, about school starting in January, about everything good and possible stretching ahead of them. Danielle listened, smiled, felt the weight of Rick's trust settling comfortably onto her shoulders. She'd tell Cameron about the money eventually, about his grandfather's complicated history, about the moral gray areas, about how people can fail and still love fiercely. But not today. Today was just about beginning, about a mother and son driving home together, about family forming in the most unexpected way, about two people who'd both lost so much, finally finding what they'd been searching for. As they pulled into the driveway, Cameron turned to her with sudden seriousness. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What's that, baby?" "I'm really glad my grandfather chose you. I think maybe he knew we needed each other." Danielle felt tears burning her eyes again. Seemed like she'd cried more in the past 3 weeks than the previous 3 years combined. "I think maybe he did," she agreed. He was smart like that. They sat in the car for a moment longer, neither rushing to move, both understanding they were standing on the threshold of something profound. "Ready to go home?" Danielle finally asked. Cameron looked at the house, his house now, officially, with the blue door and the basketball hoop, and the room waiting inside that said, "You belong here." "Yeah," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I'm ready." Christmas Eve in the Monroe household started with pancakes. Danielle had woken early, unable to sleep, from the sheer surreal joy of having Cameron actually living under her roof. She'd stood in his doorway for 10 minutes, just watching him sleep. Mr. Whiskers clutched tight, his face peaceful, in a way she suspected was new. Now, as bacon sizzled and pancake batter bubbled on the griddle, she heard footsteps padding down the hall. Cameron appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair sticking up in every direction, wearing the new pajamas she'd bought him, space-themed, naturally. "Is this real?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Am I really here? Did yesterday actually happen?" "Come here and find out," Danielle said, opening her arms. He ran to her, and she lifted him onto the counter, something Patricia would have lectured her about. He's 8, not 3. But who cared? He was hers, and she could put her son on the counter if she wanted to. "Smell that bacon?" she asked. "Yeah." "Touch this counter. Feel how cold it is?" "Okay." "Look at me. Really look." Cameron studied her face, his mother's face, with those old soul eyes. "It's real," Danielle confirmed. "You're home. I'm your mom. This is our kitchen, and we're making Christmas Eve breakfast together. Real as gravity." Cameron threw his arms around her neck, nearly knocking them both backward. "I love you, Mom." The words hit Danielle like a physical force. He'd said them before, tentatively, testing whether she'd say them back. But this was different, certain, solid, rooted in the security of knowing she wasn't going anywhere. "I love you too, baby. So much it scares me sometimes." "That's how I feel." Cameron pulled back, excited to find someone who understood. "Like my heart is too full and might explode." Exactly like that. They made breakfast together, Cameron carefully flipping pancakes with intense concentration, Danielle managing the bacon and scrambled eggs. They ate at the kitchen table with orange juice in mismatched glasses, discussing the day ahead. "So Christmas traditions," Danielle began. "We need to establish some. What do you want ours to be?" Cameron thought seriously. "Can we read together? Like, every Christmas Eve we read a book?" "I love that. What book?" "A Christmas Carol? I've never read it, but my dad used to tell me about it. About second chances and people changing." Danielle's throat tightened. "That's perfect. We'll read it tonight. By the tree." "We have a tree?" "We will in about 2 hours. I thought we could go pick one out together. Decorate it this afternoon." Cameron's eyes went wide. "Really? I've never decorated a real tree before. The Johnsons had a nice one, but it wasn't mine, you know. This one will be ours, every ornament, every light, every memory we make around it. After breakfast, they bundled up and drove to a local Christmas tree lot that was doing emergency business on Christmas Eve, catering to procrastinators and people whose lives had suddenly, wonderfully changed. Cameron took the task of choosing a tree with appropriate seriousness, examining each one carefully, asking Danielle's opinion, finally selecting a slightly lopsided blue spruce that was perfect in its imperfection. "This one," he declared. "It's not the prettiest, but it has character." "Like us," Danielle said with a grin. "Like us," Cameron agreed. Back home, they spent the afternoon decorating. Danielle had stored her grandmother's ornaments in the attic, glass bulbs from the 50s, handmade decorations Patricia had crafted, family treasures waiting for family to appreciate them. As they unpacked each one, Danielle told Cameron stories. "This one was your great-great-grandmother Esther's. She brought it with her when she moved to Houston in 1958. See how the paint is chipped? That's from when my mom dropped the box when she was about your age." Cameron held the ornament reverently. "So this is like history?" "This is family," Danielle corrected, "which is the best kind of history." They hung ornaments, strung lights, made hot chocolate that they drank while admiring their work. The tree was beautifully chaotic. No designer would approve, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. As evening approached, Danielle's phone rang. Patricia Chen. "Just checking in on your first official day as a family. How's it going?" "Patricia, it's perfect. He's perfect. We're making traditions and decorating and just being." "I'm so glad. Listen, there's something you should know. Shanice called me this afternoon." Danielle's stomach tightened. "Is she changing her mind?" "No, nothing like that. She wanted my help setting up a letter system. She's asked if, periodically, maybe twice a year, she could write to Cameron. Not to interfere, not to upset him, just to let him know she's thinking of him. She'd send the letters to me, I'd forward them to you, and you could decide when or if Cameron is ready to read them." Danielle looked across the room at Cameron, who was arranging nativity figures on the mantel with careful precision. "What do you think?" she asked Patricia. "I think it's the most selfless thing I've seen a biological parent do. She's not asking for visits or rights or anything that might destabilize him. She's just asking for the smallest connection, one that you completely control." "Let me think about it," Danielle said. "Talk to Cameron when he's older. See what he wants. That's all Shanice is asking for, that you consider it when the time is right." After they hung up, Danielle watched her son, because that's what he was now, legally and truly, and thought about the complexity of love. Shanice's love that manifested as letting go. Rick's love that manifested as making impossible arrangements. Her own love that manifested as showing up daily, consistently, imperfectly. All of it was real. All of it mattered. That evening, as promised, they read A Christmas Carol by the glow of the Christmas tree. Danielle read most of it, but Cameron took turns with passages, his voice growing more confident as the story progressed. When they reached the end, Scrooge transformed, Tiny Tim saved, redemption achieved. Cameron closed the book thoughtfully. "Do you think people can really change like that?" he asked. "I think people can grow into better versions of themselves," Danielle answered carefully. "Not overnight, like in the story, but gradually. I think my grandfather tried to do that. Your grandfather, Rick. He couldn't fix everything, but he tried to do something good before he died. And Shanice? Do you think she's really different now?" So he'd been thinking about her. Of course he had. "I think she's trying," Danielle said honestly. "I think addiction hurt her in ways that take years to heal. But Cameron, You don't have to worry about her, or fix her, or feel responsible for her feelings. That's my job now, to handle the complicated adult stuff while you get to just be a kid. But someday, when I'm older, could I I don't know, could I talk to her? Just to understand why she left? If that's something you want, when you're ready, we'll figure it out together. But there's no rush. You get to decide what relationship, if any, you want with her. That's your choice, and I'll support whatever you decide. Cameron nodded, satisfied with that answer. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the tree lights twinkling, the nativity scene casting small shadows, everything peaceful. "Mom," Cameron said quietly. "Yeah, baby? This is the best Christmas I've ever had, and it's not even Christmas yet." Danielle pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "Just wait until tomorrow morning. I may have gone a little overboard with presents." "You didn't have to do that." "I know. But you're my first kid, and it's my first chance to do Christmas as a mom. I'm allowed to go overboard." Cameron giggled, a sound that was becoming more frequent, more natural. "Okay, but I only got you one present. I made it at the Johnson's house. It's not very good. I guarantee it's the best present I'll get." They stayed up too late, talking about everything and nothing, about school starting in January, about whether they should get a dog, still maybe, about what Danielle was like as a kid, stubborn apparently, which made Cameron laugh because you're still stubborn. When Cameron finally fell asleep on the couch, Danielle carried him to his room, his permanent room, and tucked him in with Mr. Whiskers, watching him settle into sleep with the expression of someone who finally felt safe. Christmas morning brought chaos and joy in equal measure. Cameron woke Danielle at 6 a.m., bouncing on her bed like Christmas morning was an international emergency requiring immediate attention. Mom, it's Christmas. Can we open presents? Are you awake? Can we?" Danielle groaned dramatically, checked the clock, and then pulled Cameron into a hug. "Merry Christmas, baby." "Merry Christmas. Can we?" "Yes, we can open presents. Let me make coffee first." "You and your coffee," Cameron said with exaggerated patience that made Danielle laugh. Under the tree, Danielle had indeed gone overboard. Books, stacks of them, everything from age-appropriate novels to science encyclopedias, art supplies, because Cameron loved to draw, a new backpack for school, clothes that were actually new, not hand-me-downs, a basketball signed by a player from the Dallas Mavericks. She'd pulled strings through a colleague who knew someone, but it was the smallest gift that made Cameron cry. Inside a simple box was a photo frame. On one side, a picture of Rick Holloway from his younger days, successful, smiling, full of life. On the other side, a space left empty with a note. "For a photo of us together, your first family portrait. Love, your grandfather Rick, arranged before his death to be given on your first Christmas together." Cameron stared at it, tears streaming down his face. He thought of this? Before he died? "He thought of everything," Danielle said, her own voice thick with emotion. "He loved you so much, Cameron. He made sure you'd know it." Cameron clutched the frame to his chest, and Danielle held him while he cried. Not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that come when you realize someone loved you before they even met you. When he recovered, Cameron wiped his eyes and said, "Okay, now you have to open my present." He retrieved a clumsily wrapped package from under the tree and handed it to Danielle with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Inside was a drawing. Cameron had sketched two figures, clearly meant to be him and Danielle, standing in front of a house. They were holding hands, smiling, and above them, he'd written in careful letters, "My mom and me. Forever family." At the bottom, in smaller writing, "Thank you for choosing me. I choose you too. Love, Cameron." Danielle couldn't speak. Just stared at that drawing, the most precious thing she'd ever received, and understood that every difficult decision, every moral compromise, every moment of fear had led to this. To a child who felt chosen. To a family built on intention rather than accident. To love that was real precisely because it was chosen deliberately. "I'm framing this," she finally managed. "It's going in the living room, where everyone can see it." "Really? It's not very good. My proportions are wrong." "And it's perfect," Danielle interrupted firmly. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They spent Christmas Day in pajamas, eating too much, watching movies, calling Grandmother Esther, who cried happy tears at hearing Cameron call Danielle Mom, and just existing together in the peaceful certainty of permanence. That evening, after Cameron was in bed, Danielle sat in her living room holding that drawing and thought about Rick's question from months ago. What would you do if you could start over? She'd told him starting over wasn't possible, that you could only move forward with what you knew. She'd been right. This wasn't starting over. This was building something entirely new from the broken pieces of multiple lives. Rick's regrets, Marcus's struggles, Shanice's failures, and her own loneliness, and creating something whole. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen. "Merry Christmas to the Monroe family. P.S. Rick's estate has been fully processed. The trusts are active. Cameron's college fund and living expenses are secured. Rick's last gift is complete." Danielle stared at that message for a long time. The money. The $8 million that Rick had stolen, that had funded everything, that had made this all possible. She'd never reported it, never told the authorities, had made peace with carrying that secret because Cameron's future mattered more than her pristine conscience. She'd compromised her principles, and she'd do it again. Because morality, she'd learned, wasn't always black and white. Sometimes it was choosing the lesser wrong for the greater good. Sometimes it was accepting that flawed people could still do loving things. Sometimes it was understanding that justice and mercy didn't always align neatly. Rick had been a criminal. He'd also been a grandfather who loved his grandson enough to ensure his future. Both things were true. And Danielle had chosen to honor the love while acknowledging the complexity. She pulled out her phone and composed a text to the lawyer handling Rick's estate. "I'd like to establish a scholarship fund in Rick's name for foster children aging out of the system, specifically those who want to pursue college but lack resources. Use $2 million from Cameron's trust for the initial funding. Rick would want his grandson to understand that privilege comes with responsibility to help others." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Cameron would still have more than enough. $10 million was more money than most people saw in lifetimes. But $2 million could change hundreds of lives, could give other kids the chances Rick and Marcus never had. It was imperfect redemption, but it was something. The lawyer responded within minutes. "That's beautiful. I'll draft the paperwork. What should the scholarship criteria be?" Danielle thought for a moment, then typed, "Academic achievement matters, but prioritize kids who've overcome adversity, who've been counted out but refuse to quit, who understand that success isn't about perfection. It's about showing up even when everything's hard. Kids like Cameron, like Marcus, like Rick. Give them a fighting chance. Perfect. Rick would be proud. Danielle hoped so. Hoped that somewhere, somehow, Rick knew that his grandson was safe, that his final wish had been fulfilled, that his complicated legacy would include both the harm he'd caused and the healing he'd attempted. She stood, checked on Cameron one more time. He was sprawled across his bed, Mr. Whiskers on the floor, sleeping with the abandon of a child who knew he was safe, and then went to her own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, school enrollment to navigate, parenting decisions to make, the daily work of raising a child who carried trauma alongside hope. But tonight, she just felt grateful. Grateful for Rick's impossible request that had changed her life. Grateful for Cameron's courage in choosing to trust again. Grateful for her own willingness to say yes when every logical reason said no. Grateful for messy, complicated, imperfect love. What's the most unconventional way you've seen a family form? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose. 6 months later, May brought warmth and blooming possibilities to Texas. Danielle sat in the bleachers of Cameron's elementary school, watching him participate in the third-grade science fair. His project, How Stars Are Born, a Timeline, was elaborate, thoroughly researched, and quintessentially Cameron. Ambitious, thoughtful, slightly imperfect in execution, but beautiful in intention. Beside her, Lieutenant Barnes had taken a rare personal day to attend. He'd become something like an uncle to Cameron, showing up for basketball games and school events, proving that family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people who chose to show up. "He's good at this," Barnes observed, as Cameron explained stellar nucleosynthesis to a judge who looked impressed. "Confident. Nothing like the scared kid from those first photos you showed me." "He's come so far," Danielle agreed, her voice full of pride. "Still has hard days, nightmares sometimes, anxiety about me leaving. But mostly, he's just a kid, a brilliant, goofy, wonderful kid." "You did that. You gave him safe enough to be a kid again." Danielle shook her head. "We did it together. He's the one who chose to trust, to heal, to try. I just provided the space." Cameron spotted them in the bleachers and waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over his display in the process. They waved back, laughing at his exuberant clumsiness. "He gets that from you," Barnes teased. "I'm graceful. Thank you very much. You tripped over your own feet yesterday in the parking lot." "That doesn't count. The asphalt was uneven." They bickered good-naturedly, the way family does, comfortable in their connection. When the science fair ended, Cameron earned second place, which thrilled him, because first place would have been too much pressure for next year. They went out for celebratory ice cream. At the shop, Cameron ordered chocolate with gummy bears, a combination that made Danielle's teeth hurt just watching, and then asked casually, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "My teacher wants to do a unit on family trees, and I was thinking—" He paused, carefully arranging gummy bears on his ice cream. "Could we include everyone? Like my dad Marcus, and my grandfather Rick, and even Shanice? Even though they're not here, they're still part of my story, right?" Danielle felt her heart swell. This was growth. Cameron acknowledging his past without being defined by it. Understanding that his complicated history didn't negate his present happiness. "Absolutely," she said. "Family trees are about truth, not just the pretty parts. Your dad, your grandfather, Shanice, grandmother Esther, everyone who shaped you, they all belong on your tree. Even the people who hurt me, especially them." Danielle said gently, because their struggles taught you things: resilience, compassion, understanding that people are complicated. That's valuable knowledge, baby. Cameron nodded, satisfied. Then, will we put you at the center? Since you're my forever person, wherever you want to put me, it's your tree. Then yeah, center, because you're home. Lieutenant Barnes excused himself suddenly, muttering something about allergies, though Danielle suspected he was hiding tears. That evening, after Cameron was asleep, Danielle sat at her kitchen table with a letter that had arrived that afternoon. From Shanice. Patricia Chen had forwarded it with a note. Second letter she sent. First one was right after Christmas. This one feels different. Read it when you're ready. Decide when or if to share with Cameron. Danielle opened it carefully. Dear Cameron, you won't read this for years probably. Maybe not until you're grown. But I'm writing it anyway, because someday you might wonder about me, and I want you to have answers. I'm writing this from my apartment, my first real apartment in 8 years. I'm 6 months sober now, working full-time at a grocery store, going to meetings every day, rebuilding a life I destroyed. I think about you constantly, wonder if you're happy, if you remember me at all, if you hate me for leaving. I hope you don't hate me too, but I'd understand if you did. Meeting you that day in December broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. Broke it because I saw what I'd lost, this beautiful, brilliant child who should have been mine to raise. Healed it because I saw you were okay, more than okay. You were loved by someone who could give you what I couldn't. Your mother, Danielle, I mean, though I guess she's your real mother now in all the ways that matter. She's extraordinary. The way she protected you, advocated for you, loved you fiercely, even though you'd only known each other weeks. That's what real mothering looks like. I gave birth to you. That's biology. She chose you. That's love. I'm not writing to ask for anything. Not visits, not phone calls, not forgiveness. I'm writing because someday you might need to know that I think about you every single day. That getting sober was about becoming someone you wouldn't be ashamed of, even if you never know me. I'm writing because I want you to understand that addiction is a disease, not a choice. I never chose drugs over you. I was sick, and sickness makes you do terrible things. That doesn't excuse it, doesn't undo the harm. But maybe it helps you understand it wasn't about you being unlovable. You were always lovable. I was just too sick to show up for that love. If you never want to meet me, I understand. If you hate me, I understand. If you need to forget I exist to be happy, I understand that too. But if someday, when you're older, you have questions about your dad, about me, about your early years, know that I'm here. Clean, stable, willing to answer anything honestly. Until then, I'm cheering for you from a distance, hoping you have every opportunity I couldn't give you, hoping Danielle continues being the mother you deserve, hoping your life is so full of love and possibility that my absence is barely noticeable. You deserved better than me. I'm glad you found it. With love always, Shanice. Danielle read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face by the end. It was heartbreaking. It was honest. It was the most generous thing Shanice could have given Cameron. The truth without expectation, love without demand, presence without interference. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box she'd started keeping. Cameron's story. It contained photos of Rick, copies of the legal documents, the drawing Cameron had made for Christmas, and now this letter. Someday, when Cameron was ready, she'd give him the box. Let him decide what relationship, if any, he wanted with his past. But not yet. For now, he was just a kid enjoying stability, and that was precious enough. 3 months later, August brought preparations for fourth grade and a surprise visitor. Danielle was helping Cameron organize his school supplies when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find an elderly woman she didn't recognize. Black, probably in her 70s, with kind eyes that looked somehow familiar. "Can I help you? Are you Danielle Monroe?" "Yes." "I'm Angela Holloway, Marcus's mother. Rick's, well, I guess his girlfriend from a million years ago. I'm Cameron's grandmother." Danielle's mind reeled. Rick said you'd moved out of state. That family wasn't available." "I did move. To Arizona after my husband passed. Lost touch with Marcus years ago. My fault, mostly. Pride and stubbornness." Angela's voice cracked. "I only found out about Marcus's death last month. Been searching for information about his son ever since. A social worker finally told me about the adoption. Gave me your address. From inside the house. Mom, who is it?" Angela's eyes widened at hearing that word. "He calls you Mom." "He's my son," Danielle said firmly, protective instincts rising. "I'm not here to contest that," Angela said quickly. "I can see you love him. I wanted to meet him, to know my grandson. I lost my son, but maybe I don't have to lose his child too?" Danielle studied this woman. Another complication in Cameron's already complicated story. Another person with claims and histories. "Wait here," she said. She found Cameron in his room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with school supplies spread around him like an organizational tornado. "Baby, there's someone at the door. Your dad Marcus's mother. Your grandmother Angela." Cameron looked up, surprise and confusion crossing his face. "I have another grandmother?" "Apparently. She wants to meet you. But Cameron, this is your choice. If you don't want to, if it's too much, I'll tell her no." Cameron thought about it with his characteristic seriousness. "Does she seem nice?" "She seems like someone who made mistakes and is trying to fix them." "Sound familiar?" A small smile. "Yeah. Okay. I'll meet her. But you stay with me?" "I'm not going anywhere." They walked to the front door together, hand in hand. Angela's face crumpled when she saw Cameron. "Oh my God. You look just like Marcus when he was little. Same eyes, same expression." Cameron studied her carefully. "Hi, I'm Cameron. I'm Angela, your grandmother. If you'll have me in that role." "Why'd you leave my dad?" Cameron asked bluntly, and Danielle squeezed his hand in support of his right to ask hard questions. Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was young and stupid and overwhelmed. Because your dad's father and I weren't ready for a baby. Because I made terrible choices and then compounded them by disappearing instead of trying to fix things. I'm sorrier than I can say, Cameron. I failed your father. I don't want to fail you too." "I already have a mom," Cameron said, moving closer to Danielle. "I know, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not asking to replace anyone, just asking for a chance to be part of your life, if you want that. Maybe visits occasionally, letters, getting to know you." Cameron looked up at Danielle. "What do you think?" "I think family comes in lots of forms," Danielle said carefully. "I think Grandmother Angela wants to love you, and love is usually a good thing to have more of. But it's your decision." Cameron turned back to Angela. "Do you like books?" The question surprised everyone. Yes? I was a librarian before I retired." Cameron's face lit up. "Really? Mom and I read together all the time. Maybe you could recommend books? And we could talk about them." Angela looked like she might collapse from relief. "I would love that more than anything." "Okay. But you have to promise not to leave. I've had enough people leave. I promise, Angela said solemnly. I'll show up, Cameron. I'll earn your trust. I'll be the grandmother I should have been for your father. Over the following months, Angela became a regular presence, not intrusive, not trying to overstep, but consistently there. She sent book recommendations, visited once a month, shared stories about Marcus as a child that helped Cameron understand his father beyond the addiction and tragedy. She brought photos, Marcus at Cameron's age, laughing on a swing set, before life got complicated. Cameron studied those photos hungrily, finding connections, building understanding. Do you think my dad would be happy? Cameron asked Danielle one night. About you being my mom, about grandmother Angela coming back, about all of it? I think your dad's last wish was for you to be safe and loved, Danielle said. So yeah, I think he'd be thrilled. And my grandfather Rick? Definitely. This is exactly what he wanted. You surrounded by people who love you. Building a life full of possibility. Cameron nodded, satisfied. I'm lucky, aren't I? Even though bad stuff happened, I'm lucky now. We're both lucky, Danielle corrected. I got you. That makes me the luckiest person alive. A year after the adoption, Danielle was offered a promotion, supervisor position, better pay, more regular hours. She almost turned it down, worried about how changes might affect Cameron, but he'd overheard the conversation with Lieutenant Barnes about it. Mom, you should take it, he said that evening. What? The new job. You should take it. I heard you talking about it. Cameron, we don't eavesdrop. I know, I'm sorry. But Mom, you're always saying I should go after opportunities, right? You should too. I'll be fine. We'll be fine. Danielle pulled him into a hug. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. She took the promotion. The new position meant she could attend more of Cameron's school events, be home for dinners more consistently, have weekends free for basketball games and library trips, and the million small moments that built a childhood. 2 years after the adoption, the Rick Holloway Memorial Scholarship awarded its first grants, 15 foster youth receiving full rides to universities across Texas. Cameron attended the ceremony, meeting the recipients, understanding tangibly that his grandfather's complicated legacy included real, positive change. One recipient, a young woman named Destiny, who'd aged out of foster care at 18 and worked 2 jobs while attending community college, hugged Cameron afterward. Your grandfather gave me a future, she said, tears streaming. Tell your mom thank you for making this happen. I will, Cameron promised, then added, Hey, what are you studying? Social work. Want to help other kids like me navigate the system. That's cool. My mom works in corrections. She says the system is broken but worth fixing. Your mom sounds smart. She is, Cameron said with fierce pride. She's the best. 3 years after the adoption, Cameron started 6th grade, middle school, that terrifying transition. He was nervous, worried about fitting in, carrying the anxiety that trauma-informed kids often carry. But he also carried something else, the certainty that he had a home to come back to, a mother who would listen to his worries, help him navigate social dynamics, remind him that he belonged. What if I don't make friends? He asked the night before school started. Then you'll be uncomfortable for a while, and eventually you'll find your people, Danielle said. But Cameron, you're funny and smart and kind. People are going to like you. What if they ask about my family? It's complicated to explain. Then you tell them whatever you're comfortable with. I'm adopted is complete information if that's all you want to share. Or you can tell the whole story. Your narrative is yours to control. Cameron thought about that. I think I'll say, My mom chose me, and that makes me lucky. Perfect. That year also brought the first letter Cameron wrote back to Shanice. He'd asked to read her letters on his 11th birthday, said he was ready to understand more about his past. Danielle had given him the box, sat with him while he read everything, held him while he processed. Afterward, he'd asked if he could write back. Not to see her, he wasn't ready for that, but to let her know he was okay, that he didn't hate her, that he understood addiction was a disease. His letter was simple. Dear Shanice, my mom, Danielle, let me read your letters. Thank you for being honest. I'm doing good. I'm in 6th grade now. I like science and basketball and reading. I have a mom who loves me and a grandmother, Angela, who visits and friends at school. I don't really remember you, which maybe sounds mean, but it's true. But I don't hate you. My mom says hating people for being sick doesn't make sense. I'm glad you're sober. I hope you stay that way. Maybe someday when I'm older we can meet. Or maybe not. I don't know yet. But I wanted you to know I'm okay. You don't have to worry about me. Cameron Shanice's response came 3 weeks later. A simple thank you, a promise to stay clean, and a wish for his continued happiness. No pressure, no demands, just love from a distance. 4 years after the adoption, Cameron was 12 and asking complicated questions. Mom, how much money did my grandfather leave me? They were driving home from a basketball game. Cameron had made the school team and played with infectious enthusiasm, if limited skill. Danielle had known this conversation would come eventually. A lot. More than most people see in their lifetimes. Like how much? $10 million in trusts for college and your future. Cameron was quiet, processing. That's a lot. Yes. Where did it come from? And here was the moment Danielle had been preparing for. The truth, age-appropriate but honest. Your grandfather made money in oil and real estate. He was very successful. But Cameron, he also made mistakes. He took money that wasn't his, and he went to prison for it. Some of the money he left you came from those mistakes. Cameron absorbed this. So he was a criminal? He broke the law, but he was also a grandfather who loved you and wanted you to have opportunities. Both things are true. Is it bad that I have the money? Should we give it back? It's complicated. The court settled his case years ago. The money is legally yours now. But I created a scholarship in his name, used some of it to help other kids who need chances. So his money is doing good, even though where it came from was complicated. Cameron stared out the window, watching houses pass by in the twilight. Do you think that makes it okay? He finally asked. Using bad money to do good things? I don't know if okay is the right word, Danielle said honestly. I think it makes it human, imperfect. Your grandfather wasn't a villain or a hero. He was a person who made both terrible choices and loving ones. And now you get to decide what to do with the legacy he left. What would you do? I'd use it to make the world better. Go to college, study something you love, build a life that helps people. Turn his complicated history into your purposeful future. Cameron nodded slowly. I think I want to study social work, like that scholarship girl, Destiny. Help kids who don't have families find good ones. Danielle felt tears prickling her eyes. Your grandfather would love that. So would your father. And you? What do you think? I think you're going to change lives, baby. Just like you changed mine. 5 years after the adoption, Cameron turned 13, officially a teenager, which he announced with dramatic flair at his birthday party. The celebration was held at their house, now filled with evidence of their life together. Photos covering every wall, Cameron's artwork framed and displayed, Sports trophies on shelves, books overflowing from cases. Grandmother Angela had flown in from Arizona. Lieutenant Barnes brought his wife. Neighbors from the block came, the family they'd built from proximity, and shared barbecues and borrowed cups of sugar. And in the corner, watching with quiet joy, sat Grandmother Esther in her wheelchair. 96 now, frail but sharp, she'd insisted on attending. "Come here, baby boy," Esther called to Cameron. He went immediately, kneeling beside her wheelchair. She cupped his face in her weathered hands. "You look happy," she said, "truly happy. You know what that means?" "What, Grandmother Esther?" "It means the cycle is broken. Your great-great-grandmother cleaned houses so your great-grandmother could work better jobs. Your great-grandmother worked so your grandmother, me, could get educated. I worked so your mother could become someone. And your mother worked so you could be free. Free to just be happy, without carrying the weight of survival." Cameron's eyes glistened. "I'm going to make you all proud. Baby, you already have. Just by being loved and letting yourself love back. That's the victory. Everything else is just details." Later that evening, after guests had left and cleanup was done, Danielle found Cameron on the porch swing, staring at stars. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Just thinking about how different my life could have been if my grandfather hadn't found out about me, if you'd said no, if Shanice had gotten me back, if any of a million things had gone differently." Scary thought? Yeah. But also, it makes me grateful, you know? Like, I won the lottery. Not the money lottery, the family lottery. Danielle wrapped her arm around his shoulders. He was getting tall, almost as tall as her now, growing into the young man he'd become. "I'm the one who won," she said. "You gave me purpose, Cameron. Gave me a reason to be better than I was." "We made each other better," Cameron corrected. "That's what family does." They sat in comfortable silence, rocking gently, watching the neighborhood settle into night. "Mom," Cameron said eventually. "Yeah? Do you ever regret it? Taking me on? All the complications and hard conversations and scary moments?" Danielle turned to face him fully, making sure he could see the absolute truth in her eyes. "Not for one single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Cameron Marcus Monroe. The absolute best. Even though I'm not your biological kid. Especially because you're not. We chose each other. That makes us more family than biology ever could." Cameron leaned his head on her shoulder. Still young enough for that. Not yet too cool for mom cuddles. And they watched stars emerge one by one in the darkening Texas sky. How has someone outside your biological family changed your life? Share your chosen family stories in the comments. 7 years later. Cameron stood in the living room of their house. His house. The only real home he'd ever known, adjusting his cap and gown for the 100th time. 20 years old now, graduating with honors from the University of Texas with a degree in social work, headed to graduate school in the fall, already interning at a foster care agency, already changing lives. "Stop fidgeting," Danielle said, straightening his collar even though it didn't need straightening. She just needed to touch him, to reassure herself he was real, that this impossible journey had led them here. "I'm nervous. You're valedictorian of your department. You have nothing to be nervous about." "That's exactly why I'm nervous. What if I mess up my speech? Then you'll be human, and everyone will love you anyway." Cameron laughed. He'd grown into his features, was handsome in a way that combined his father's intensity with something gentler, something that spoke of healing rather than haunting. "Is everyone coming?" he asked. "Everyone. Grandmother Esther is being transported by medical van. She wouldn't miss this for anything. Grandmother Angela flew in yesterday. Lieutenant Barnes and his wife are already at the venue. Half your former teachers, apparently, because you were everyone's favorite student." "And Shanice?" They'd met 3 years ago, when Cameron turned 17 and decided he was ready. It had been awkward, emotional, complicated. But they'd built something. Not a mother-son relationship, but something gentler. An understanding. Occasional coffee meetings. Honest conversations about addiction, recovery, and the long shadow of choices. "She'll be there," Danielle confirmed. "Back row," she said. "Doesn't want to intrude, just wants to witness." Cameron nodded, satisfied. "And Mom?" His voice changed, became softer. "Are you proud of me?" Danielle felt her throat tighten. How could she explain the magnitude of her pride? The way watching him grow had been simultaneously the hardest and most rewarding thing she'd ever done. "I have been proud of you every single day since I met you," she said. "When you were 8 and scared but trying to be brave. When you were 13 and struggling with identity questions. When you were 17 and decided to meet Shanice even though it terrified you. And today, watching you graduate with honors, while planning a career, helping other kids like you were. I am so proud I can barely breathe." Cameron's eyes glistened. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You would have found a way. You're remarkable, Cameron. You always were. I just provided the space for your remarkableness to flourish." "We did it together," he corrected, echoing his words from years ago. "That's what family does." At the graduation ceremony, Danielle sat between Grandmother Esther and Grandmother Angela, watching Cameron cross the stage, shake hands with the dean, accept his diploma with a smile that could light cities. When they called him to give his valedictorian speech, the entire auditorium seemed to hold its breath. Cameron stood at the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began. 7 years ago, I was a kid in foster care. I'd lost my father, been abandoned by my mother, and was bouncing between temporary homes, wondering if anyone would ever want me permanently. I had every statistic working against me. Foster kids have dramatically lower graduation rates, higher incarceration rates, more mental health challenges. By every measure, I shouldn't be standing here. But I am, and I want to talk about why. I'm here because a dying man I never met loved me enough to arrange my future. Because a corrections officer named Danielle Monroe said yes to an impossible request. Because a foster family named Johnson loved me gently during my transition. Because a grandmother named Angela came back even though she had every reason to stay away. Because a biological mother named Shanice loved me enough to let me go. I'm here because of chosen family. Biology doesn't make family. Love does. Showing up does. Fighting for each other does. My mother, Danielle, isn't related to me by blood. She's related to me by choice. She chose to take on a traumatized 8-year-old who wet the bed and had nightmares and tested every boundary to see if she'd leave. She chose to show up every single day, even when I made it hard, even when everything was complicated, even when easier options existed. That's what family means. Not perfection. Not even biology. Just presence. Just the willingness to say, I'm here and I'm not leaving. So to everyone graduating today, remember that family is what you make it. That love is a verb, not just a feeling. That showing up, consistently, imperfectly, stubbornly, is the most important thing you can do for someone. To my classmates entering social work, remember that every child you encounter is someone's whole world. that statistics don't define potential, that the kid everyone else writes off might just need one person to believe in them. And to my mom, Danielle Monroe, sitting in the third row trying not to cry, thank you for choosing me, for fighting for me, for showing me what unconditional love looks like. Everything I am, everything I'll become, starts with you saying yes when you could have said no. I love you, Mom, and I promise to spend my life passing forward what you gave me, the chance to be loved, to be seen, to be enough exactly as I am. To the class of 2032, we made it. Let's go change the world. The applause was thunderous. Danielle wasn't trying not to cry. She was openly sobbing, Grandmother Esther holding one hand, Grandmother Angela holding the other, all of them crying together. In the back row, Shanice wiped tears from her face, whispered something that looked like, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Lieutenant Barnes gave Danielle a thumbs up from across the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. After the ceremony, surrounded by congratulations and camera flashes and the joyful chaos of celebration, Cameron found Danielle. "Did I do okay?" he asked. She pulled him into a fierce hug. "You were perfect. You are perfect. Not because you're flawless, but because you're yours, authentic and brave, and so full of love. I meant what I said. Everything I am starts with you." No, baby. Everything you are starts with your own courage. I just provided the space for you to be brave. They stood like that for a long moment, mother and son, chosen family, evidence that love can heal what trauma breaks. As the crowd thinned and families headed to celebratory dinners, Grandmother Esther called them over. "Cameron, baby, come here. I need to tell you something before I forget." He knelt beside her wheelchair. "What is it, Grandmother Esther?" "I'm 96 years old. I won't be here much longer. But before I go, I need you to understand something." "Grandmother, hush, listen. You are the culmination of generations of love and sacrifice. Your great-great-grandmother who cleaned houses. Your great-grandmother who fought for better. Me, who made sure your mother could become something. Your mother, who chose to love you fiercely. All of us, working across time, so you could stand here today, free, educated, loved, ready to change the world. You carry all of us forward. Every time you help a child in foster care, you honor the sacrifices that led you here. Every time you choose love over fear, you prove that healing is possible. Every time you show up for someone who needs you, you become part of their healing story, just like your mother became part of yours. Do you understand? You're not just Cameron. You're the answer to prayers your ancestors prayed before you were born. You're proof that love is stronger than systems, that connection matters more than biology, that family is something we build with intention and presence and stubborn, relentless showing up. Promise me you'll remember that. Cameron's voice was thick with tears. I promise, Grandmother Esther. I promise. She patted his face gently. Good boy. Now go celebrate. You've earned every bit of joy today brings. That evening, at a restaurant Danielle had rented out for the occasion, everyone gathered, family in all its complicated, beautiful forms. Grandmother Angela shared stories about Marcus as a child, giving Cameron pieces of his father he'd never known. Lieutenant Barnes told embarrassing stories about Danielle from her early police days, making everyone laugh. Shanice, sitting at the edge of the group, but included nonetheless, caught Danielle's eye and mouthed, "Thank you. For loving Cameron, for including her, for not making her the villain in this story." Danielle mouthed back, He's extraordinary. Shanice nodded, tears streaming. Because of you. As the evening wound down, Danielle stepped outside for air. Cameron followed. Big day, he said, leaning against the building beside her. The biggest. I remember when you were 8, drowning in that too big shirt at the Johnson's house, trying to decide if you could trust me. And now look at you. Graduated, brilliant, ready to change the world. We've come a long way. We have. And Cameron, whatever you do, wherever life takes you, I want you to know that being your mother has been the greatest privilege of my life. Not because you turned out successful or because you're graduating with honors, but because you're you. Because you taught me that family isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every single day. Even on the hard days? Cameron asked with a smile, referencing the teenage years that had tested them both. Especially on the hard days. Those days taught us we were strong enough to weather anything together. Cameron pulled something from his pocket, a small, wrapped box. I got you something. For today. Danielle opened it carefully. Inside was a locket on a delicate chain. She opened the locket to find 2 photos, one of her and Cameron on his first day in her house, both looking slightly terrified, but hopeful. The other from today, graduation caps and genuine smiles, comfortable in their belonging. On the inside of the locket, engraved, chosen, forever. Love, Cameron. I figured you could wear it. Remind you that you changed my life, that I chose you back, that this goes both ways. You're not just my mother, I'm your son, by choice. Danielle couldn't speak, just pulled him into a hug and held on tight. Thank you, she finally managed, for letting me be your mom, for trusting me with your heart, for teaching me that the best families are the ones we build intentionally. Thank you for building one with me, Cameron replied. They stood together in the warm Texas evening, watching stars emerge, the same stars Rick had looked at during his final days, hoping his impossible plan would work, the same stars Marcus had looked at, wishing for his son's safety, the same stars that had witnessed generations of struggle and love and stubborn survival. What do you think happens next? Cameron asked. I think you go to graduate school, change hundreds of lives, probably make me cry at your wedding someday, and give me beautiful grandchildren who will call me Grandma Monroe and roll their eyes at my stories. That sounds perfect. What do you think happens next? Danielle asked. I think we keep showing up for each other, keep choosing each other, keep proving that family is something we create through love and presence, and never giving up, even when things get hard. Also perfect. They stood in comfortable silence. 2 people whose lives had collided in the most unexpected way, creating something neither had imagined, but both desperately needed. Mom, Cameron said eventually. Yeah, baby? I'm glad my grandfather chose you. I'm glad you said yes. I'm glad everything happened exactly the way it did, because it led us here. Me too, Cameron. Me too. And as they walked back inside, to their celebration, to their chosen family, to their hard-won happiness, to their imperfect but beautiful life together, both of them understood something fundamental. Love isn't about being related by blood. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other, over and over, even when it's hard. It's about building family intentionally, carefully, stubbornly. And sometimes, the most powerful love stories aren't about romance. They're about a dying millionaire, a brave corrections officer, and a traumatized 8-year-old boy who all chose each other across impossible circumstances and built something extraordinary. Rick Holloway's last wish had been fulfilled beyond anything he could have imagined. Cameron was safe, loved, thriving, and two people, Danielle and Cameron, had found in each other exactly what they'd been missing. Family, chosen deliberately, loved fiercely, cherished completely. What's your definition of family? Share your thoughts below on what makes someone truly family, beyond biology.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.